What is the simplest, smallest action that you could apply to have discipline in your life?
The problem is we tend to think of these ideas as like things you are or aren't. Aristotle specifically says, no, that's totally wrong. So if you want to be more courageous, you got to do stuff on a consistent basis that scares you. That's how you have courage. That's what discipline is. It's a habit or a practice that you build, not a thing that you are or aren't.
Today, best-selling author Ryan Holiday breaks down the exact frameworks he uses to stay calm when everything's on fire, make sharper decisions under pressure, and most importantly, for you to get things done. So if you want to build a mind that doesn't crack when the stakes get high, this conversation is for you. How do you battle procrastination? And what have you learned through Stoicism on how the greats do this too?
Seneca says, this is the one thing all fools have in common, is that they're always getting ready to start. I'll do it in the morning is probably the most insidious lie there is, but it also presumes that there is a later.
Can Stoicism help with anxiety?
Of course. We know the Stoics experience anxiety. Marcus Aurelius talks about it in Meditations. He says,
you gave some advice that I thought was really prolific on what to do when you are panicking and you have no idea what to do next. So I wanted to ask you, what do you do when you're in a moment of crisis? You're panicking, but you've got to break free.
So actually, this came from a talk I gave to the Los Angeles Rams. We were talking about this idea of panic rules. Like, what do you do when coverage gets blown? What do you do when things go crazy? Like, what are the sort of bedrock best practices that you go back to? Because I think we make a lot of things very complicated, and then when you're sort of in the shit, all that goes out the window. That's what I feel like Stoicism as a philosophy is. We tend to think of philosophy as like theoretical and abstract and very high-minded. But for the ancients, it was this kind of thing that you practiced and you went over and over again, so that like in big moments, like when you have a big life decision or your life is on the line or your whole world is falling apart, like what do you do then? So that's what I think a panic rule is. And I guess, if you're sort of distilling Stoicism down to some core practices, it's like focus on what you control, do the right thing, don't let your emotions cloud your judgment about this. Just because they're simple doesn't mean they're easy.
That's so true. It's interesting because I have read your book, I was telling you, for years, The Daily Stoic. And why I love it is because Stoicism, if I'm going to go back and read Epictetus, or if I'm going to go back and read even Meditations, which I find like a little bit more accessible, it's dense stuff.
Yes.
And what I think your books do such an incredible job of, and I want people to get today, is how to take these core ideas that lead to a disciplined and in some ways more beautiful life because of that discipline and get it simply. And so you had this great quote that I loved, which is, when you're lacking motivation, remind yourself, discipline now, freedom later, the labor will pass and the rewards will last. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, there's a line from one of the great Stoic teachers. His name was Musonius Rufus. And he said, when you do something in pursuit of pleasure, or you're taking a shortcut, like the benefit that you get from that passes quickly, but the shame or the consequence of it lasts. And he says, conversely, when you do something hard, the labor passes quickly, but like the good from that remains. Like when you work out, it's painful in the moment. When you get in a cold plunge, it's unpleasant at first. When you get up early, you're tired. When you work an extra hour, there's a cost to that. But the benefits, they not just endure, in many cases, way off in the future, the pleasures or the benefits that you experience are a lagging indicator from that. And so if we want to think of discipline, like discipline is, or self-discipline anyway, is about constraint. Do this, don't do that. That's hard, but it provides you the freedom down the road because you either have some financial security, you have strength, you have confidence, you have health, whatever the thing you're delaying gratification for. Well, at some point you do get that gratification, and it's a more sustainable, enduring, and stronger reward than whatever you would like to get in this moment.
Yeah. My husband's a former Navy SEAL. And I remember, asking him once, like, why do you like to follow the rules so much? He actually likes to follow the rules
Sure.
often. I think you would agree with that classification. And I sort of don't. And silly rules, like, I'm going to walk across the street, not in the crosswalk, like very silly things. And he'll be like, let's just wait for the thing. And, I was like, how does that work? Like, you're a Navy SEAL. And his comment to me was like, the only reason that we could do the things that we did is because we had to operate inside of the rules.
Sure.
And like the second that you lose the rules, there's actually all of this freedom within the constraints.
Yeah, there's an artist, I forget who it was, that said, you want to be orderly in your sort of personal life, in your space, in the studio, so that you could be radically transgressive in the art. And I think there's something to that. Like, it does require a certain amount of rule breaking and independent thinking to be successful at anything. But if you question everything, if you're contrarian about everything, if you disregard everything, what you live in is chaos and dysfunction. And also it's exhausting because you have to think about everything. And so when we think about discipline, again, as a constraint, what it really is freedom also from that chaos and dysfunction. And it's allowing you to channel your energy. One of the things I do talk about when I talk to military groups is sort of the tension you're talking about, which is like the whole system is about creating rule followers, creating cohesion, creating coherence, creating camaraderie, a sameness. And yet, to ultimately be successful at the end, there has to be independent thinking. There has to be the ability to, in the moment, do hard, right things. And so, from the entrepreneurial space, you can get so used to just doing your own thing that it makes it hard for you to function as part of a team or part of a group or just like simplify your existence. And then conversely, you can live in a very simple, straightforward existence. You do what they tell you your whole life, and then comes some big moment where what they're telling you is wrong or incorrect or dangerous. And do you have the courage and strength to ignore those rules then? That's the tension every individual has to figure out.
Yeah. You've read, I don't even know how many books and papers and research. You own a bookstore, for the love of God.
Yeah.
And so, what I think is interesting is if we take these like esoteric ideas, kind of like discipline, you do a great job of simplifying them to the things that you can do. So if somebody's listening today and they're like, all right, I'm buying what you're selling. I'm buying this idea that a life that is more disciplined could actually be better. What is the simplest, smallest daily habit or action that you could apply to have discipline in your life?
The problem is we tend to think of these like virtues or these ideas as like things you are or aren't, that you have or don't have, right? Like, I'm a courageous person, I'm a creative person, I'm a disciplined person. And then we think it's this matter of identity. And then when we don't have it, we feel bad about ourselves. Actually, the ancients, Aristotle specifically says, no, that's totally wrong. It's something you do or don't do, right? He says, like, to be a woodworker, you work with wood. That's how you develop the skill, the virtue of woodworking or playing the flute or whatever it is. So if you want to be more courageous, you got to do stuff on a consistent basis that scares you. That's how you have courage. You either are doing it or not. So it's a verb and not a noun. And so, like, if discipline, you're going into the new year, a lot of us are like, I want to eat better. Maybe you're like, I want to be more disciplined. Well, that's a really hard thing to be generally. So you want to pick some specific things. And, like, what time you wake up is a great one. Or conversely, what time do you go to bed? Like, a lot of people are like, you got to wake up early. Well, waking up early in isolation is not great if you stay up till 2 a.m, right? Because now you're actually you have what they would call in the military, poor sleep discipline, right? And so maybe it's like, hey, in 2026, I'm going to go to bed by 10 p.m. every night, right? Then you've just, by the way, made getting up early a lot easier. So I would pick some core, accessible, definable tasks or items that you're going to be more disciplined about. Even like, I want to eat better this year. That is a very hard, ill-defined thing to do. But if you say, I'm going to quit sugar this year, or I'm going to go vegan this year. Whatever, it could be any across the spectrum of the thing. The point is, what is the black and white line that you're drawing, and then you're on one side of that line or not. That's what discipline is. It's a habit or a practice that you build, not a thing that you are or aren't.
Yeah, that's a good point. I also like this idea of that you said, like, what is the one easier sort of snowball effect move that you could do that
Sure.
makes the others more simple? And
Yes.
so, like, you're right, getting up early is harder than
Yeah.
going to sleep earlier. Whereas, like, laying out your workout clothes easier than
Yes.
just going to the gym. So
Sure.
it's like, what is that preemptive move you could do that's 10x easier, but leads to a higher likelihood of you doing the next step?
Yeah, like I want to use my phone less this year. Okay, so I'm going to delete social media apps from my phone, or I'm not going to.
Do you actually do that?
I don't have any social media apps on my phone.
Like my husband, he's the same. This is so.
I obviously have to use it for my work. I mean, I have a team that helps me, but like if I have to check, it's on my wife's phone. So I go, hey, can I borrow your phone for a second? And then there's a ticking clock. She's like, give me my phone back, you know? But the point is like, how do you make it a little bit less tempting, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you go, I'm not going to sleep with my phone in the room, or I'm going to leave it in the car when I get home from work, right? And so you can say, hey, generally, I just want to do the less of this thing, which means you're going to have to make lots of individual choices throughout the day and the week and the month and the year. And you might be able to start strong with that. But as you go on, because you're tired, because you're hungry, because stuff's happening, you're going to be able to make excuses. And so how can you make clearer, simpler things that have like a big cumulative impact? That's what you want to think about.
We're just such good self-rationalizing machines too.
Yes.
Like I've realized that, everybody's like, oh, that guy's bad, that guy's good. I'm like, we're all sort of bad and good. We're just varying degrees of good at self-rationalizing why we're bad or good.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there is this insidious voice that's always sort of, well, it's okay this time, right? The ability to make excuses, the ability to make exceptions. This is like our superpower. And you want to sort of preempt that as much as you can.
I like this idea of no phones because you have another quote I love, which is the secret to success in almost all fields is large, uninterrupted blocks of focused time.
Of course.
Which feels, one, impossible to get.
Yeah.
And so how do we get it? And why is that the key? What does history and your experience tell us?
Most of the big things in my life came from lots of thinking or concentration. I had an epiphany, I had an insight, I had an idea. Mm-hmm. I worked really hard on a problem. And then you go, well, if that's really the big mover, right? I mean, like even the number of ideas that I've had on vacation or on walks with my family. I go, if I didn't have the discipline to put my work down and go for a hike, the last series I did, I had the idea on a hike with my kids. And so, how are you setting the events in motion so that thing can happen, right? And I think people know that creativity and problem solving requires focus. And then you go, okay, but when I look at your calendar, you were all meetings all day, all week. Of course you haven't been having ideas, right? Of course you haven't been having those conversations that unlock something. And also, of course you aren't happy. Like this isn't what you're meant to do. You're not meant to be on Zoom calls all day. This sucks, right? And so I think like when I look at my calendar, I was just talking to my assistant about this, their job is to keep things out of the calendar, not put things in the calendar. The calendar should have large amounts of white space, in my opinion. And that's not because I'm not working. It's because I haven't scheduled interruptions to the work. If there's a blank space in the calendar, I'm going to use that productively. That's who I am. But if there is podcasts and meetings and errands and phone calls, what I'm not only am I not doing the thing, now the thing I'm supposed to be doing is I'm trying to squeeze into the little cracks as opposed to it being the main thing. So like, how do we schedule the time when we're at our best is really important. And to me, and I think you find this with most creative people, it's usually the mornings when it's quietest. Toni Morrison, the novelist, she was a single mom and she was an editor at Random House as she's working on her first novel. And she found like to get any writing done, she had to get up. She said, not just to get writing done, but to do her best writing, she liked to write as she saw the sunrise. And then she said it was, she found that she did her best writing before she heard the word mom for the first time. And so you're like, okay, so you know that is from 4:30 a.m. to 6 a.m. And so you've got to orient your day around that, not, well, that's when I'm best, but I actually sit down finally to write at 2 p.m. And so when are you at your best? When can you concentrate the most? When are the fewest interruptions? And then how do you make some hard adult decisions to center everything around that?
I feel like you need to stop yelling at me.
Sorry.
Because I feel very called out about
I'm
this.
yelling at myself as well. And these are things you learn the hard way. Like every time I sit down to work in the afternoon, I'm like, this is why I don't do this. Because like I'm at best 70% of my best, and that's not what you want to be doing.
But I love that line, like your job is to keep things off the calendar, not put them on. That is not typically how we think. And it's like this inverse thinking, the Charlie Mungerism, which is like, what is actually the goal? And so how can we think 2 or 3 steps forward? I like how your mind works like that. And so you have a couple quotes that I love too on procrastination.
Yeah.
Which is something we all struggle with. But this one about to procrastinate is to be entitled. It is arrogant. It assumes there will be a later. It assumes you'll have the discipline to get it later, despite not having the discipline now.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful. And so tell me, how do you battle procrastination? And what have you learned through Stoicism on how the greats do this too?
Well, we all battle procrastination. This Seneca says, this is the one thing all fools have in common, is that they're always getting ready to start, right? Like we don't say we're never going to do it. We say tomorrow, we say next week, we say in the new year, right? We say when the kids start school, right? We make up a reason why it can't be now. And the problem with this connects to another really, I think, powerful Stoic practice. I have a memento mori ring on right now. The Stoics are meditating on our mortality. So like, it's not just like, hey, you're probably not going to get to it later. That's a lie we tell ourselves. I'll do it in the morning is probably the most insidious lie there is. But it also presumes that there is a later, right? Like it presumes that you can call your mom, when things settle down. It presumes that next year is yours to take for granted. And it's not. We don't have forever. Not just that all of us are going to die at some point, but that point could be like right now, or conversely, could be someone else. I mean, it was a very life-changing experience for me. I feel guilty on some level that it came out of such a cost. But I remember when I was an editor at this newspaper, a friend of mine sent me this article. He was like, hey, here's my column. And I saw it. I remember I looked at the email and I was like, I'll get to this on Monday, and he died on Sunday. He went out for a hike and he had a heart attack and he died. And I didn't even give him the courtesy of saying like, hey, I got this. Thank you. I'll review it on Monday. I left him on red, And so not only do you not have forever, not only could you go at any moment, but the person or the thing that you're taking for granted could go away at any moment. And so it's not that it is for certain going to go, but it could. And this has to inform our procrastination, our tendency to procrastinate, because in light of it, it becomes extremely entitled and in some cases very reckless.
You just landed your first major client. Congrats. This is huge. But here's the thing. Big wins come with big exposure. One mistake, one mishap, one unexpected accident, and that dream contract could turn into a nightmare. Next Insurance helps owners like you protect what you're building. So you get instant online quotes, coverage tailored to your specific business, and an instant certificate of insurance so you can start work immediately. No complicated forms, no waiting around for someone in a cubicle to approve your livelihood. So whether you're a contractor, creator, consultant, cleaning crew, Next makes it painless to get protected so you can focus on growth, not what could go wrong. Winning is great, but getting covered is what keeps those wins. Check out nextinsurance.com/Codie and protect your first major contract today. I was just watching 1923, one of the Taylor Sheridan series, and I'm not a big TV watcher, but I find it really useful because their lives are so hard and miserable and terrible and short.
Yeah.
And, it's the epitome of like nasty, brutish, short.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that it reminds me is this memento mori, because I found for entrepreneurs, we're a little crazy. We always live in the future
Yeah.
or like in the moment intensely. And so this idea of it could all end, it's not going to matter, you don't matter,
Yes.
is actually kind of hard. And so I was curious from your take, for high achievers in particular,
Yeah.
is living in the moment and this idea of analyzing death particularly hard?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things you see as high achievers or high performance people is this idea, we were talking about delayed gratification. That is what makes them great, right? Like, I'm going to be really miserable now so that in the future I can be successful.
Right.
And there's something to that, right? Like, as I say, all success is a lagging indicator. The problem is, and this isn't so much about memento mori, but it is an important thing, like the idea that the shit now is worth enduring because it will be amazing later is a dangerous thing to fool with, right? Not just because you might not get later, but because you don't actually control whether later happens. And by that, I don't mean you could die. I just mean like the market could shift, the economy could crash, the government could nationalize your industry. So many things could happen, right? Like you can do everything right in life and get fucked. And so I do think we spend a lot of time doing things in the present, and we're trading it for this future payoff. And again, this is partly rational and partly okay, but it can be like I've just learned that and I learned this the hard way over the many books that I've done, like if the experience is miserable and painful and lonely and stressful, but the payoff is that it comes out and it hits the list and people say nice things about it, that's a big gamble because you can get screwed by the list. Your book could come out in the middle of a pandemic. You could get canceled. Like things can happen. And so I've tried to do a lot of work at getting better at not being miserable while I'm doing it, right? Like how do I enjoy it while I'm doing it? That doesn't mean I don't work any less hard, but what I try to do is go like, this is the part that's up to me. And so enjoying it and getting rewarded for it is also up to me. And I'm not going to be a miserable fuck day to day so that in the future, I feel good for 2 weeks when it comes out. And then I start the whole thing again. That seems like a bad trade is I guess what I'm saying. And I think a lot of, like whenever I talk to athletes, there's not a single athlete that you will ever talk to who's retired, who doesn't say something like, I wish I enjoyed playing more. Because at some point it just goes away. And then at that point, the winning and losing stops mattering. And all they think back is like, I was in the NBA and I was miserable because of winning or losing, instead of being able to just be grateful that I get to play professional basketball. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So how do you enjoy the journey while it is a miserable one?
Well, in the Bhagavad Gita, they say that you're entitled to the work, not the rewards of the work. And so you go, okay, this is the thing. There was a period in my life when I was younger when all I wanted was a chance to do a book, right? And here I am doing that, right? Like this is the dream. This is what I signed up for. Like you love real estate, you love managing people, you love training, you love practice, whatever the thing is, you have to love it and not what maybe or maybe not comes out of the other side. And so I just try to put like the finishing touches on it each day and go like, I did my absolute best. I made a positive contribution. I got to do this thing. I gave my best. That's wonderful. And then I try to think of whatever rewards or success happens later, not as unimportant, but as extra. So I've said this before, but I remember on my first book, I was probably 10% proud and happy that I got to do a book, and 90% that period where, so for people who don't know, your books come out on a Tuesday, sales are basically pre-orders, then Tuesday through Sunday. And then there's this period from Sunday to Wednesday, and then back a million years ago when I started, there was also Friday. You would find out on the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal list. That week period where the book was done and there's nothing else I could do, and I was waiting to hear how it did, that was 90% of the success for me on that first book, right? Like I'm waiting for somebody else who I don't know, who is following arbitrary made up rules and has a bias and an agenda. I'm waiting for them to tell me in the vast majority of cases, what I just worked for years of my life on was worth it or not. And that is crazy, right? Like if waiting for the deal to close or the wire to come through or the article to hit the presses or whatever the thing is, right? The Grammy nomination to come in, the Oscars, whatever the thing is, if that's all of it for you, you better hope everything goes right and you're part of the in crowd and they accept you. And so I've tried steadily, and it's been a lot of work and there's been some ups and downs, but I've tried to flip that. Like 90%, I get to do my dream. I said what I wanted to say. I worked really hard on this. I know it's good. I grew as a person, all these things that are up to me. And then there's 10% where I'm like, sweet, it debuted at #1. That's really cool too. But like, I was already in the A range before that happened.
It's funny with creating online too. I've really found it the same way. I haven't been doing it as long as you, but let's say I started getting online 3.5, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And at first, it's so easy to get sucked into this arbitrary number of people who engage or don't engage, like or don't like. And at some point, you start realizing that you hate the thing that you created to get the likes for other people to like it, but you don't like it. It is the most, bizarre circle until finally, thankfully, I was older when I started doing it. And I was like, this is a sick disease. Why are we playing this game?
Yes.
Let's create things we actually like and are proud of. And don't get me wrong, we stray away from it all the time. And all of a sudden I'm, in a chicken suit on South Congress or something ludicrous. You're like, how did we get here? But that practice of coming back to, did I create this thing because I'm really proud of it and I think it should exist in the world? And if everybody hates it, fuck me, but I don't care.
And also, how do you set up systems and a culture and make choices where it's enjoyable while you're doing it, right? So like if you create so much stress and so much anxiety and so much pressure, and by the way, you're doing so many things at one time that like your life sucks. Again, you're putting it all on the potential payoff, which if you talk to successful people, nobody ever gets. And I don't mean that they're never successful. I just mean nobody feels like they arrived, that they finally got, more out of it than they put into it. That never happens. So you have to think like, how do you make your day-to-day life and system and career and the thing you do as close to a form of reward and enjoyment and a process that you appreciate. And then here's the trick is like, if that's the case, you will do it a lot and you will probably make good stuff that works, right? If you hate it and it's the worst, like I know people who they haven't done this. And so like, they just don't do that much work. Like they're intimidated and reluctant to like start again, right? Like if you're an athlete who's dreading the start of the season, well, you're not going to work that hard in the off season. But if you're like someone who I just fucking love playing, you're going to play all the time and you're always going to be thinking about it and you're just going to put more into it. So I found the less I think about what the Stoics would call the externals, the more I just do better work. And then paradoxically, the more I get the things.
Yeah, it is sort of funny, isn't it? I want to talk about another paradox that I loved a story you wrote, actually in the new book, Wisdom at Work, which is you tell the story of a Zen master and his beautifully prized cup and what happens, and then the story of Epictetus and his lamp. And one, I think it'd be interesting for you to tell the story if you remember it. And then two, I want to talk about I can't sometimes reconcile the positive versus the negative of like manifesting or focusing on things.
Well, the Zen masters had a lot of stories about cups. I think the one you're talking about is the Zen master who has a cup. It's his prized possession, and he tells himself over and over again, the cup is already broken. The cup is already broken. And, one day the cup breaks and he's not surprised by it. For the Stoics, although I'm sure they did appreciate positive visualization, they actually practiced negative visualization. So like if the Stoics believed that the secret was real, they they'd be getting themselves in some real trouble, right? Because they said that actually you should be thinking about the worst case scenario, thinking about the cup being broken, thinking about the travel delays, thinking about getting canceled, thinking about the deal falling through, thinking about negative media attention. And their point was not that this invites this to happen, because that's not how that works. It was that the unexpected lands the heaviest, right? Seneca said that the one thing a leader is never allowed to say is, wow, I didn't think that would happen. And you're right. He's right. That is the job of a leader, is to be like, okay, we planned for this. Here's what we're going to do. Right. And you're talking about your husband and Navy SEAL. They practice for the worst things the most, right? They don't go like, and here's how it goes swimmingly, because it always goes swimmingly, right? It's like, I mean, on the famous Bin Laden raid, they had an extra helicopter because they planned that one might crash, right? And what you get not only is the situations where one crashes and then you have the extra helicopter, but you've also developed this muscle of like, hey, shit goes wrong all the time, and I don't freak out. I just go to the next option. And so that's what you want to cultivate, right? So like people, the Stoics use this word indifferent a lot, and people think that indifference is like, that's a controversial word, right? Like indifference means you don't care. But the Stoics meant it in the sense like, I'm indifferent to whether it is hot or cold. I'm indifferent to whether it is a bull market or a bear market, right? Like whether it's a time of peace or time of war, because I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it's about. So I don't think it's like pessimistic, and I also don't think it's like tempting fate. What you're trying to do is think about what could happen so that if and when that does happen, you're like, okay, and then you do what you need to do.
So do you think most people visualize or manifest wrong?
Well, I think most people are afraid to think of bad things because they think they'll invite that into their life. And the problem is, bad things are going to come into your life whether you think about them or not. And that's what they mean when they say the unexpected blow lands heaviest. Like, to be surprised is to add insults to injury, right? To think it's unfair, to think that it's devastating, to not know what to do. That's how you take a bad thing and make it worse. So I don't think, in a bull market or in a boom time, to be going, what would I do if market dropped by 40%? That's not going to make the market go up or down, but it does puts in motion some thoughts that you might need to rely on at some point. Like Napoleon said that his generals should say to themselves 3 times a day, what would I do if the enemy appeared on my left? What would I do if the enemy appeared on my right? What would I do if the enemy appeared on me behind me? And this is to say, like, you don't know what the enemy is going to do. They're precisely trying to come upon you as a surprise. But also, I think it's just a good mental exercise. Like, it's keeping your mind moving instead of being complacent and secure, which, none of us are.
Do you think you have a photographic memory? Your one-liner recall is amazing.
This is my job. This is my job. I don't think I have actually, I know I don't have a photographic memory. What I have is a system by which, when I find information that is interesting to me, I write it and organize it and return to it enough times that I develop a feel for it.
I want to hear about that because, you talk about Abraham Lincoln, famously, I think people would call him a stubborn reader.
Yes.
And that he, would have to, in order to get him to remember something, he would have to like etch it on steel, and steel is quite hard to etch upon.
What he said was that his mind was like steel, that it was hard. It's hard to scratch something into it. Right. But once it's there forever.
So I want to talk about that. So what is your process to do that?
Well, I read a lot. Yeah. That's like, I see myself as like a professional reader. That's my job. And then I don't leave it there. Like, I read with a pen, mm-hmm. and I take notes, and then I transfer those notes. I was just before this, I just read something for a book I'm writing, and taking that and I'm transferring it to note cards by hand. And it's not quick, and it is not scalable, But that is like the whole point. I think sometimes we look for technological solutions to make things easy, and the whole point is some things are supposed to be hard. You know, it's supposed to be difficult, and it is in the difficult part that you're scratching it into the steel, and then it's there. So I take advantage of all sorts of new tools, of course, AI being one of them. But my research method is as analog and as old school as it can be, because I'm trying to actually understand what I'm dealing with.
You know, I love this because you talk a lot about knowledge. I mean, you could say your entire project in some way is that. And I think it was in Wisdom at Work, but I loved the line from the book. It's actually from Thomas Gray, I believe, where he said, "You must love learning if you would possess it."
Yeah.
And I think that was applied to Lincoln in your book. But as a stubborn learner, somebody who wants to possess knowledge, how do we do that? How do you actually go and learn things? You've talked about reading books multiple times. You've talked about rereading them. Like, how does one go and really acquire deep knowledge and remember it?
Yeah, there's a magical thing that happens when you get a payoff for having like learned and studied something, right? Like, I think in school, you're assigned a bunch of books, and the payoff is like you do well on a test that you're not sure why you're having to do. But the first time you read a book and it changes your life, or it makes you a friend, or it makes you money, and you go, oh, there was like a return on this investment. Like, you think, like Warren Buffett is told to read The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. And, you know, that's probably the single best investment in human history. You know, like, he reads this one book and he makes $100 billion. But, you know, my life was changed by a handful of books that I read. So it's a hard thing to explain until you've experienced it. But when you go, oh, this is for something. This isn't just like to impress random people, but like there is in these books, in these lectures, in these experiences, in these people out there, like priceless wisdom, things that can not just save you painful trial and error, but can make you money, can change the course of your life. That's like a really powerful thing. And it's sad to think like most people, or many people, have never experienced that. Like, you talk to people and you're like, oh, I haven't read a book since high school. And you go, so you learned a lot of things the hard way, you know, like there's a lot of things that every phase of your life from then to now, everything you've done, a lot of people have done before you and made all the mistakes and made all the right choices and written books about it, or made videos about it, or talked about it, or there's movies, like there's so many things you could have learned that you decided to learn on your own. That's crazy.
Yeah. And also, I think books are really unique because you have to, if you're not listening to them, but reading them, you really can't do anything else. There's no multitasking while reading a book. Whereas a movie, you could be thinking about other things. It's very passive. Like, reading is so active. And again, to your point on hard things lead to the right outcome, it's harder.
Yes.
And so it probably does get that scratch and steal that, you know, Lincoln talks about. But I was curious for you, you're a big rereader of books from what I can see. So what are the 5, 10 books that Ryan Holiday says changed his life and that you go back to and reread over and over again?
Yeah, I think reading a book once is great, but when you read it again, you are reading a new book because you're a new person. The book is the same, but you are in a different place and you will take different things out of it. I think Marcus Aurelius' Meditations is one of the most incredible books ever written. You know, The Private Thoughts of the Most Powerful Man in the World. You know, it's an amazing book. I think all of Robert Greene's books are amazing. You know, Mastery is worth reading and rereading. The 48 Laws of Power. The Laws of Human Nature, you know, like Robert's stuff is designed to be layered and to take multiple things out of them. I think Thoreau and Emerson, you know, Civil Disobedience and Self-Reliance are also incredible. All of the Stoics, you have Seneca, you have Epictetus, I love. I read this book by Tolstoy almost every day called The Calendar of Wisdom, which is like a collection of all of the reading he did in the course of his life, just like little passages every day. It's a similar book to the Daily Stoic. I think the idea is that to really understand something, you got to spend a lot of time with it. It can't be, I think people are always looking for shortcuts, and they're like, oh, I read this on 3x speed on audiobook. And you're like, I don't know if that's winning here. Like, I don't know if you're trying to get it done as fast as possible. I think you're trying to spend as much time as possible with it. And so, I don't know anyone that reads a lot that's like trying to spend less time doing it.
No, that's definitely not the case. Is Tolstoy's book, is he just like tragically sad throughout it? I find all of his writing to be such
his fiction is very much that way, but it has more hope in it, and it's more spiritual than you would guess.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was so he wrote it, he thought it was his greatest book, this thing called Calendar of Wisdom. And then the Russian Revolution happens like almost right after his death. And so it's banned. And it's not really rediscovered until the late 80s. So it's a very popular book, but it's much, much less known than any of his fiction. And it's like a lovely little self-help book.
Let's give like for a particular person. So you're a father.
Mm-hmm.
You have a son and a daughter?
I have 2 sons.
2 sons.
Yeah.
So, for them coming into young men, let's say, what are the books that you will set, on their desk as they come into being, young men that you would want?
That's a good question. I haven't come up with the reading list yet because they're still pretty young, but we spent a lot of time when they were young. Look, children's books are great, and they're all about pizza and monkeys and ridiculous shit, and I love that. Right? There's nothing better than your kids like having fun reading. Like Adam Rubin has this book called The High Five Book. Have you seen this one? Where you're like smacking it. They have this one right now that they love called like the dumb guide to all the stupid birds in the world, and it's just filled with like cursing. I love all that stuff, but I think that's not why we read to our kids, right? Like we read to our kids to instill them lessons and to teach them how to be a person in the world. And so we've spent a lot of time with the sort of myths and stories and fables. Like Aesop's fables operate on these incredible multitude of levels, right? Like to them, it's a funny story about a fox and grapes, and to you, it's a lesson about not being jealous or abandoning what you have and because you want something else, or writing off what someone else has. What I mean is that I try to go to the things that contain wisdom that maybe they don't fully understand in the moment, but I want that familiarity to be there, and I want it to be working on their brains. So we spent the last couple years like doing the Odyssey, and then we listened to podcasts about it, and then we read a graphic novel about it, and then we read the actual poetry, and then we went to Greece, and like what I'm trying to do is when there's that like flicker of interest, to fill it with all the possibilities of that thing. But I try to go mostly to stories of like great men and women from history that are gonna inspire them to want to be like those people. Because I don't want them to be like a monkey or whatever. Like I want them to be, like Cincinnatus or the 300 Spartans or George Washington. I want to pick those kind of stories that, whether they're true or not is much less important to me than whether they have some kind of moral lesson that sticks with them. That, by the way, when they get into situations in life, I can be like, this is like that thing that we learned about.
Yeah. You have a lot in here, which I think is hard for people to do, but so important, which is about like knowing oneself. And so, there's a quote about so much knowledge is lost to us because we are ourselves lost and lost unto ourselves. The Oracle of Delphi sort of famously says,
it's
know
inscribed.
thyself.
There's 3 things inscribed over the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, where I was just this summer, and it's know thyself, all things in moderation. And then this one I think has particular relevance to entrepreneurs, planners. It says, offer a guarantee and disaster threatens, which is basically Murphy's Law. If you think it's going to go this way, just wait. But we tend to chase knowledge. We want to learn about all these facts in the world. We want to learn about these systems, this history, how physics works, how the universe works. And then, we're strangers to ourselves. Like, I've met a lot of smart people. I would say I've met many fewer people with what we would call self-awareness, right? And that self-knowledge, a knowledge of our weaknesses, a knowledge of why we are the way we are, a knowledge of what we like, knowledge of what we don't like, knowledge of how and why we operate. And by the way, also just knowledge of humanity too. This is why I think Robert Greene's book on human nature is so important. But just like knowing like how we work, why we work, and some of this you get from reading, some of it you get from experience, some of it you get from therapy, some of it you get from close friends. But the idea of just like knowing yourself is ultimately going to be the knowledge I think you need most at difficult points in your life, because you're going to want to catch yourself from doing that thing that you might unconsciously do, or following that pattern again, or, reacting immaturely or irresponsibly. Like, we all have, I would say, like an inner child, right? Like, there's that part of us that's still a kid, and you don't want a kid making adult decisions for you, right? And so if you don't know who that kid is and what they're triggered by and why they do the things they do, you're going to make some real irresponsible, dangerous decisions in the moment. You're going to think they make sense, but if you had a little more self-awareness, you'd be like, no, that's that part of me that just like instinctively, intuitively, like, you tell me to do this, I'm going to do that. And it's like, sometimes that's a good thing to do, but maybe in this case, it's not.
Yeah. You wrote an entire book, Ego is the Enemy. You talk a lot about ego being bad, but can you tell us, like, the greats had to struggle with ego?
Well, it is interesting, right? Like, I think we've all seen, whether in direct personal experience or, culture, history, art, we can see what ego looks like in other people, and we can see how it holds them back. And it's not that egotistical people never become successful. Most of them, many of them do, right? Most successful people have big egos. But what you see up close is how this ego prevents them from being more successful. And then, of course, what you don't see is all the times that ego destroyed someone before they became successful, and you never heard about them. But I guess what I'm saying is that you can see how ego holds other people back so much, and then you're like, but not me. And that's fucking ego right there. Like the idea that you don't have an ego is like the definition of ego, right? You're like, I'm above this. Though it's different with me is like, profoundly egotistical. But what ego does is it gets in the way of the feedback that we need to get, the relationships we need to have, the truth we need to see, the reality we need to understand, the weaknesses we have but can't see. And so if you're trying to do something that's really hard, and the risks are high, and the odds are low, ego is like a real dangerous thing to get in the mix. Now, oftentimes people go, but isn't a little bit of ego important, right? Like, don't you have to have that part of you that wants to do stuff or that believes you can do stuff? I would say what you're probably talking about there is confidence. This person you're talking about, like, I think you probably very clearly see a distinction between confidence and ego. Ego is something toxic and much harder to deal with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what like stories or moments made you even recognize this? You know how sometimes, I don't know about you, but like I'll have to have a story break me through.
Yeah.
And you could tell me something theoretical. And then unless you can kind of like, can you explain that to me?
Sure.
Or give me a case study, or like, tell me a time where there's like, let me explain to you how ego destroyed a man or a woman.
Yes.
Or what we could learn from it.
Well, this is why reading and experience, like in the pursuit of wisdom, are so important. Like, you read about things and then you see it in real life and you go, oh, this is what that playwright from 2,000 years ago was talking about. Or conversely, you go out and you have a bunch of experiences and then you're watching Shakespeare or a movie, or you're listening to a song or a poem, you're reading a book, and you're like, oh, this is that, right? Like there's this similarity there. And so I was thinking about doing this book about ego. So I wrote The Obstacle Is a Way, which is about the things that get in our way and how we can use them to our advantage. But I was like, well, But most obstacles are not external. It's not like, oh, this is a bear market, or, oh, they just put a bunch of regulations in, or, oh, this happened to this person and now they have to overcome. Most of the reasons that empires fall or people don't succeed, it has nothing to do with external stuff at all. It's in here, right? Like, the problem is you. Ego is like that big problem. So I was thinking about doing a book about ego, and I had been for many years the director of marketing at American Apparel, and I'd left when my book started to work, and I got called back when they famously fired the CEO and founder, and I was a consultant in what was a last ditch attempt to save the company from him and the sort of downward spiral that he put it in. And watching someone who'd built basically $1 billion company, had 250 stores in 20 countries, that had revolutionized fashion, that had done a lot of good in the world too, and just also was this feat of logistical and business and creative genius, watch them destroy it, and then watch them not be able to handle the objective feedback that, hey, you fucked this up and we're firing you. And if you can just sit over here and be in timeout, your shares will one day be worth a lot of money again. And instead engage in this sort of this death wish. Like he destroyed it from the outside. He couldn't even allow it to be handed off to someone else. And it wasn't me that was doing it, but watching him then destroy it from the outside, double down on all the things that got him in trouble, and then, lose all the shares, and everyone lost their job. That was the sort of subtext of the book, is I was writing about ego historically, but I was watching it also happen in real time. And that's not an isolated incident, right? Like, there are so many stories like that in the history of business and politics. And there's this point where all the assets the person has turn into liabilities. And ego is usually like the swing vote in that transition.
How do you tell if you're falling prey to ego? Is there like a practice you do? Do you look in the mirror and you go, Ryan, you good looking son of the bitch, this is not it?
When you find yourself saying like, how dare you, or like, who are they?
Who do they think they are?
Yes. Do you have any idea? Those are all things like when you're saying like, oh, it's different this time, or the rules don't apply, or it's different with me, or you don't understand. Like I tend to find like those kind of phrases or ideas to be very insightful little indicators. Oftentimes I find, and again, ego is there. It's always there. It's just, are you letting it make the decisions or not? Like when I send in one of my books and I have in my inbox right now a round of notes from my editor, and I've not looked at it for 3 weeks because I know my initial reaction is, what the fuck? How, like, who are you to tell me, like, I want to let this sit and I want to get in a better place. And then, I find when I go through it, I go, okay, well, there's some stuff in here. And then, maybe I'll do this one, maybe I'll start with all the typos. I'll and then after I've gone through it a couple of times, I put in like 80% of what they said, right? But in the initial moment, you're like, I handed you perfection and you gave me, a marked up, underlined draft. How dare you, So it's like, I tend to find that the first reaction is emotional or egotistical, or that's where your insecurities come to light. But if you sort of sit and let it process a little bit, you can get something closer to more objective or rational.
Yeah. One of the other things I like about what you talk about is you have a lot of opinions, obviously, but which I think is a good thing. But I loved one of the lines you have from Marcus Aurelius, which is that you always have the power to have no opinion.
Sure.
And so I was curious on you. Do you think everyone should have an opinion? And if so, why? If not, why?
Well, we all have opinions. It's just, how often are these opinions serving us, and how often did anyone ask? Understanding that you have the power to just not think about something, to not have an opinion, I think is very empowering, especially to go, hey, like, I don't have to care about what you like. I think that's like when you're young, you have a lot of opinions about like whether like music or art or comedy or whatever is like objectively good or not. And then you get older, you're like, who gives a shit? If you like this, you like it. You're not wrong. If you like it, you are not wrong, right? If you tell me I have to like it, that's different. But that's not what you're doing. But we just tend to have opinions about so many things. That's what the media ecosystem is about, right? That's what social media is driven by. Hey, this happened. What do you think of this? Don't you want to leave a comment? Don't you want to get in an argument with a total fucking stranger about about something that not only doesn't matter, but they might not even be a total stranger. You could be arguing with a bot right now. And so the ability to go, that's what you think, cool, is really, really important. And what this should do ultimately is save you to have opinions or to feel strongly about the things that do matter and that you do have some semblance of a say over. And so I think just a lot of us are following too much in the sort of latest outrage cycle. We're following too much in real time as it's happening. I even think about this as a parent, like the arguments I got in with my parents over things as a kid that in retrospect, they don't care about and I don't care about anymore. And if they had just waited, I would have gotten over it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
So I just try to think with my kids, just like, do I need to have a thought on like how this, like I'm making this as if it's some issue of character or if it's something, essential about the functioning of our lives, and it isn't, like if you want to wear Crocs, wear Crocs. I don't care, like
No, that's not allowed. Baseline.
But so much of conflict, especially when your kids are older, is rooted in just the parents having opinions about things that they don't need to have an opinion about.
That's very true. Have you ever left negative comments under somebody else's post on the internet?
I mean, every time I regret it. Like there's not a single time I've ever posted anything on social media like in the moment that I later was like, I'm so glad I did that,
I just always wonder who's out there. Comment, like I'm having a breakfast and I really don't like yogurt, so no yogurt today. And somebody's like, "Fuck you, I love yogurt." You're like, why? Can't you just love yogurt over there somewhere else?
I mean, for Daily Stoic, we were just doing this fundraising thing for Feeding America. And it was amazing to watch people have negative opinions about that.
For Feeding America?
Yeah, it was just like, well, what about this? Or whatever.
Oh,
Like,
right.
what about this cause? Or like, I didn't see you talking about this also. Or like, are you also going to raise money for this? And it's like, I'm doing this right now. This is the one I'm doing. You don't have to participate. No one asked, I didn't even ask you to participate. And by the way, what they're trying to do is denigrate the good that you are doing so they don't have to feel bad about the nothing they are generally doing. They're trying to go, if I cancel this out, then we're even, and then I don't have to feel, like compelled to do something. That's something I think it took me a while to understand. But like, why do people gamble in casinos? Like, why do people smoke? Like, why do people do a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing? There's some kind of biological urge or susceptibility that smart people or, some kind of chemical or system has triggering, triggers or preys on, and they don't understand that that's what's happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think just realizing that like social media is dependent on your unpaid labor, emotional and otherwise. Like it is designed to make you uncomfortable or provoke you into clicking, reading, or posting or watching or whatever it is. And that like, it's really good at that. And so I do have some sympathy for the people, right? Like the only way to win is not to play. Yeah. Right. And they've got to understand that like this thing is manipulating you. Like you're the product that's being sold here. This outrage that you're feeling, this fight that you're picking, that's the driving engine of this whole system. And you gotta not do it.
It's very true. Yeah, I've increasingly, now these days, I'm like totally uninterested in discussing, for instance, politics. And so, like, I think it's important as a civics, person and a
Yes.
member of society to like do your civics duty and to participate in it. But I find like angrily yelling at people on the internet one way or the other is not that useful.
Right.
And then what's fascinating is every time I have found somebody who might diabolically disagree with me. I've had people on the podcast that are way to the left.
Sure.
I've had people on the podcast that are way to the right, Karl Rove. So I've got the full spectrum. And I actually loved Karl and I loved the other, which I won't say because I don't know if she would classify herself that way, but as way to the left,
Sure.
I loved too.
Sure.
And like I learned lessons from both. And I know, I guess kind of where I wanted to go to this is like, I think we worry so much about what other people think about us, and we worry so much about what other people think or allowed to think.
Yeah.
And I was reading some of your pieces on, I believe it was Seneca. Is he the one that was like enslaved and in
That's
prison?
Epictetus.
Fuck. And I always call it Epictetus, but it's Epictetus.
He's dead.
Listen.
He doesn't care.
Anyway, I would be curious your take on like, you have so much from so many greats on what do you do when you feel like there are haters or people that don't like you?
Yeah. Well, the haters existed in the ancient world. I mean, Seneca, who you were talking about, is not just a controversial political figure. It's not just a wealthy guy who has sort of, people who don't like him for that reason. He's also Rome's greatest playwright at that time. So he would have written things and people would have said, that sucks, like, I hate this. So like they got it from all angles. I mean, Marcus Aurelius is the emperor of Rome. Like, there are statues of him, like people who are saying you're the greatest, like literally worshiping him as a god. And then there are people who are trying to kill him. And so like, this is a timeless thing, right? He says in Meditations that for some reason, even though we all love ourselves more than other people, we care about other people's opinions more than our own. And one of the things I try to remind myself, a couple things. I go, number one, is it possible for everyone to like you? Like, is it possible that you could publish a book that 100% of the people think is good and appreciate? It's like, no, definitely not, right? Like, it's a percentage, even a good percentage. There's still going to be a percentage of people that don't like it. And actually, the more successful you are, the bigger in raw terms that percentage will amount to. So, I've been very fortunate. My books have sold millions of copies, which I take to mean there are millions of people who don't like me. Like, not just millions of people who saw the stuff and then decide, like, I would argue more people saw it and decided not to buy it than saw it and decided to buy it. And then of the 10 million people that have bought one of the books, I can't have 100% satisfaction guaranteed, right? So let's say 10% of people didn't like it. That's 1 million people. That's a major city in the United States that doesn't like me.
Just anti-Ryan signs.
but like, when you can do that math, then you're like, okay, when I get a shitty email, or I see a comment, or a review in a newspaper is bad, what you're able to do is say to yourself, this is one of those people. Like, this person was statistically guaranteed to exist. There's no escaping it. Why am I surprised that I encountered one of them, right? Like, in fact, they are the tip of a larger iceberg that I'm not seeing. So let's leave it there. The other thing I try to tell myself is like, who is this person to tell me how to do what I'm doing? Like, I remember at one point this thought occurred to me. I was like, these people don't work hard enough for me to care about their opinion. Like, they don't know what I'm doing. They don't know what I'm trying to do. They don't know what success is to me. They don't know what I value. And also look at what they've done. Why am I letting them decide whether I succeeded or failed or not? And so when you kind of go, okay, a certain percentage of people are not going to like you. Certain number of those people aren't worth thinking about at all. And then ultimately, like, success has to be self-defined or else it's not worth anything. That's kind of how I think about the haters thing. And then the other one that Marcus Aurelius does talk about a lot that I think is really interesting is he talks about like people who want to leave like a legacy, like people who want to be remembered. And he just goes, what good is that? He's like the people in the future are be just as dumb as the people who exist now. And you won't exist. So it won't do you any good whether they like you or not. Right? Like, I think a lot of people, they spend all this time trying to create this, not just success now, but this monument that endures for all time, as if that's of value. Like it isn't. It's not only something you don't control, even if it was guaranteed. It doesn't do Marcus Aurelius any good that I'm quoting from Meditations right now. It doesn't bring him back from the dead.
Also, if he walked on the street, we wouldn't even recognize him.
Yeah, sure.
So like, it's like there's no, and he's probably one of the most pervasive.
Yeah, that's one of the most famous people who ever lived in their own life, and he's mostly forgotten. And if the movie Gladiator didn't exist, he'd be even more forgotten. It's like, it's just not something worth chasing.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, I always thought there was like a little Instagram line that I thought was funny. And it was like, you don't like me. You don't even have personality privileges. And I just giggled because I think the Gen Z gets it right sometime, you know? And a lot of these people, they say they don't like you. They know nothing about you. And how many people truly know you? Truly.
Well, the Stoics would also say, and this is from Epictetus, he says, if they truly knew you, they'd probably say something worse. So like, just tell yourself you got off easy. Like they're criticizing you for something that they read, that you wrote, or that they saw you do. Imagine if they could really peek inside. They could see your deepest thoughts, and they could see what you do in private. You got off easy with this criticism. So take it and move on.
That's actually so good. There's also, my husband bought a little magnet that we kept in San Diego, and on it was a line from Marcus Aurelius, but it was something like when you step outside your door, expect people to be terrible.
He opens meditations with this.
Yeah. Well, how does that go? Do you remember?
He says today the people you will meet will be angry and jealous and dishonest and stupid and obnoxious. And he just goes on down the list. And that is true. That's what the Stoics are saying. Don't be surprised. Like, don't expect to avoid this. But the second part of this is actually a little more hopeful than people give the Stoics credit for. He goes, but don't let them implicate you in ugliness. Don't let them drag you down to their level. And he says it doesn't change the fact that we're all made to work with each other. And by the way, again, if there is a statistical necessity or certainty that some people are those things, then you should have sympathy for those people. You go, this is their job. They, just like somebody has to pick up trash, somebody has to clean toilets, somebody has to do stuff, right? Somebody has to be that person too. And you're lucky that you're not that person, and they're unlucky that they are that person. And that's, you go, okay, you're the 1 out of 100 that sucks, and that sucks.
Really important question.
Yes.
Should we all really get a donkey?
I think that donkeys are amazing. I actually asked Arnold Schwarzenegger that question because he has one too.
Get out of town.
And he said, I don't know if they're the best pets, but they're like big, dumb dogs.
Yeah, they're not smart.
That take care of themselves. Well, they're very smart, but just like big, I mean dumb in that they're not as like coordinated as dogs, you know? Ours can open our fence, it can open the back door to our house. Like they're very clever. And they all, like, people think they're stubborn, but it's more like they just don't do anything that they don't see a reason to do. So
do they cuddle? Do you cuddle their dog?
Yeah, they'll come up, and if you have carrots and stuff, they'll nuzzle against you. We have cows on our ranch, and so you need a donkey as like a livestock guarding animal. So we got one. And
the donkey protects the cows?
Yeah, they'll chase off coyotes and mountain lions and dogs and stuff.
Whoa.
Yeah, they're very, very protective. They they kind of hang out on the periphery of the herd, and they just don't like anything messing up the vibe.
I like this.
Yes.
I knew I wanted a donkey. It's on my Christmas list. So now we've moved that up.
Well, I'll give, if we have so we have one, and then we had to get another one because they get lonely, and they have a baby every 13 or so months, and then it's a problem of what do we do? So I usually give them to people.
Oh
so
my God.
I'll
put me on the giveaway list, the Ryan Holiday donkey list.
Yeah.
I would do some unhinged things for that, especially the baby donkeys. Okay, that was important. The other thing, I didn't even know this about you. I had such a fun, you know how you follow somebody online for a long time, you read their books, and you have this parasocial relationship, right? So you're like, I know what Ryan's all about. And then I went down just a rabbit hole of how long you have been on the internet, and asked a bunch of your friends. But I came across like a lot of your marketing background, which I didn't know about.
Yeah.
And there was like a quote from a New York Times profile about you. By the way, the quote was amazing. I mean, the article was amazing.
Okay.
But the line was, Ryan Holiday runs his own marketing firm, Brass Check, and has written boastfully about the depraved publicity tactics he deployed on behalf of his clients. What a fucking line. I want to hear about some of these firsthand. What are these ridiculous marketing stunts you've done?
Well, I mean, I wrote a whole book about sort of publicity stunts and
Which one was that?
It's called Trust Me, I'm Lying.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about sort of media manipulation and how the media system can be vulnerable to all of these things. I mean, I opened that book with a story about a movie I was working on, and it had a very small budget. And so, we couldn't spend very much. So we took the relatively small bit of the budget and we bought some ads, which I then defaced. And then we took pictures of them, and then we sent them around. And we created this sort of backlash against a campaign that like didn't exist really. And, we got it was banned by the Chicago Transit Authority. Like we tried to buy, ads in Chicago on all the trains. And then they rejected it, which is like what we wanted because we didn't have the money to spend on the thing. But then the media coverage around that got seen by many thousands of more people than would have ever seen the ad. So I did a lot of stuff like that.
Do you do any of that anymore? Do you do any
not so much
crazy
anymore?
stunts?
I mean, every once in a while I'll do something for fun. But my career there was fascinating and compelling. I wouldn't say it was, exactly a positive contribution to society. And so I think I sort of grew out of it a little bit. But I was really interested in how this system worked and what the vulnerabilities were in the system. And I sort of saw it as this challenge. I did a lot of stuff that was funny and interesting and provocative, but, again, not really what I felt ultimately like I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. What's funny, there's a quote in that New York Times profile you mentioned that is not haunted me, but some people try to throw in my face. I said, she was like, maybe you're just writing about this to make money or something. And I was like, look, if you're good at marketing and you could sell anything. And I was like, especially if you don't have a conscience, right? I was like, I was like, you could sell cryptocurrency or this or that. You'd sell whatever you want, right? And I was like, why would I choose this? That's what I was saying. But she sort of cut off the last part. So I was basically just saying, if you're good enough and shameless enough, you could sell anything. Which is why you always have to be careful about making sure your complete thought is untruncatable, right? Because the context of it can be stripped out of it. But my point was I just got tired. I was like, I don't want to spend my life selling other people's shit. That's just not really what I wanted to do. And so I was like, well, what do I care about? What am I interested in? And ultimately, my marketing business, which I kept for many years and I consulted mostly, but I just thought I just got tired of giving advice that nobody listened to, even though they paid me for it. And I just thought, well, I know who will take my advice, me. So I just started to make my own things. And I think ultimately, if you have real marketing chops, that's what you should eventually evolve towards, is your own stuff.
Yeah. I on accident got invited by a friend who was the one getting the award to this kind of famous advertising association event in New York. And I went because I was in town and I adore her and she needed a buddy. And so I went with her. And it was the most fascinating night, actually, because it's an advertising event, right? And yet, if you were to hear the speeches...
Were they bad?
Well, no. Oh. They were actually beautiful, and the videos were beautiful, but it was this is the most important room in the world with the people who are changing the world every day. And I'm like, am I in the cancer wing?
Sure.
Wait a second. I feel like I'm in the wrong area. And so it was fascinating because person after person was talking about how advertising and marketing is the cornerstone of humanity. And you could argue with that one way or the other. But what I kind of did like about it is whatever you're going to do,
should be good at it.
Yeah, and you should maybe feel that way about it.
Yeah, although I remember when I was at American Apparel, every year I would go to this thing in New York called Ad Week, which is this like series
Yeah.
of conferences and galas and award shows like that. And I remember the first time I went, I was probably like 20, 21, and I'm like the kid there. I'm the only one not in a suit,
Yeah.
The only one not working at some big company with a huge budget. And then I went the next year, it was sort of same thing, and next year, and I always felt like an outsider. And I remember it occurring to me like the third or fourth year, if I keep coming to this, I'm going to be a guy in a suit. Like you become like the people you spend time with, right? Yep. And actually Epictetus has this line. He says, if you live with a lame man, you will learn how to limp. And I just realized like, oh, this is an interesting period in my life and I'm learning a lot and I'm making good money and it's exciting and interesting. But like there is a point of no return that I am approaching and I have to get out soon or I have to commit to this thing. And so that was part of the reason that I ultimately, sort of made the leap, which seemed crazy at the time. Like, wait, you're the director of marketing of a publicly traded company, you're gonna go write a book? Like you don't even have a book deal for it, you're just gonna go write a book? Like what's wrong with you, But I just knew that wasn't who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And again, to go to the idea of procrastination, everyone says at some point I'm going to do it. And you're not, and the longer you don't do it, the more and more likely it is that you will never do it because you've actually said over and over again who you actually are, which is the person you're currently being, not the person you think you could be.
It's so true. We call it the corner office phenomenon. And I'm like, basically, I've found this happens a lot with people that were in corporate spaces. It happened with me.
Yeah.
I remember I had a moment like you where I looked down the hall at the guy who was in the corner office, who had the job that I would have if one day I achieved the highest of the heights in my profession. And I was like, oh my fucking God, no.
Yeah.
He looks miserable. He had multiple wives. There were lots of cars in the garage. I don't care about garages. He was working nonstop. He wasn't healthy, vitamin D deprived, all of the things. And I think often we can just look at that and go, oh, when I'm there, sure, I'm not going to be like that.
Yeah.
It'll be different when I'm there.
Yeah.
But if instead you can really look down the hall and go, like, if I had lived that man's life, I would probably be that man.
Yeah.
And so am I sure that that's what I want? If I can look into the future and see, is that the kind of suit that I want to wear?
Yeah. The system is shaping you every day that you are in it, and you are internalizing its values and its personality and its identity. And the idea that that you're going to go along to get along for 40 years and then be a visionary rule-breaking leader is extremely unlikely. You just follow the rules for 40 years to get this thing that you're now terrified of losing. You're actually going to be less courageous, more risk averse than you thought you would be. Like you were like, if I was in charge, it would be different. And it's like, no, it's gonna be exactly the same because it was shaping you as you were in it.
Yeah. So do you think that humans are contagious?
I think examples are contagious. I think culture is contagious. Values are contagious. Sure.
Like, I think we named the company Contrarian Thinking, obviously. And to your point, I kind of labored over that. One, it's a terrible name. There's so many vowels and it's like A's and I's and I don't know where they're located. Nobody can spell it.
Yeah.
But maybe more important than that, I remember reading Letters to Young Contrarians back in the day. And I always really liked that book. It's a kind of a ridiculous, short, cute book in some ways. But I liked the idea of if you do not question things, then you will just assume everybody else's fate. You have to be careful to not be a contrarian for contrarian's sake.
Yes.
But at a base level, we do just kind of move along to get along, right? And so this pushback is hard. And with your books, I would say, most of the stuff that you've created, and you do it now today, like you'll post something about something politically you might think, and a lot of people hate it, and a lot of people love it. And I sometimes think maybe that's like inoculation against caring. But how do you inoculate yourself against becoming somebody else's representation of you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think, do you know what audience capture is?
No.
I think we work really hard as a creator, an artist or writer or whatever to build an audience. And then you think you have the audience, but actually the audience has you. Because now you're afraid of losing it, right? You're like, oh, when I talk about this, people don't like it. Or, when I wrote about this, like Substack subscriptions went down, or, I got a lot of angry emails. And okay, so now what you've said is that you have a boss, right? Like I became a writer and a creator to make what I wanted to make, not to make what you want me to make for you, right? And so that's something I just think a lot about. Like, is this something that I think is important? Is this interesting to me? And then also I try to think, like, what are my obligations? I have like a little note card on my desk. And it just says, like, are you being a good steward of Stoicism? And I think about that because, I didn't invent this philosophy. It's a tradition that stretches back 25 centuries. I just happen to be publicly associated with it, and it's done me a lot of good. But if I'm only going to use it to tell people what they want to hear, or tell people the easy, obvious stuff, then I'm exploiting it as opposed to contributing to it. And so I think there's a fine line, of course. Like, it's not about a giant middle finger to the audience all the time. That's not right. But you have to do and say what you think is true and important. Because, by the way, nobody was begging for me to talk about this 15 years ago when I started, right? If I asked for approval, I wouldn't have had the support to get going, right? So like you have to trust that instinct.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's a beautiful line, because you can become so selfish sometimes, I think, as a creator or as somebody with an audience or as somebody successful, because you can really surround yourself with sycophants.
Totally.
And then you can create this weird world in which everything actually caters to you.
Yes.
But simultaneously, I think most people don't end up there. Maybe really successful people do. I think that's actually less normal. And it seems like most people let other people become the architects of the houses that they live in.
Yeah, and it's just more information and feedback than a human could possibly deal with. Like the Daily Stoic email goes out to 1 million people every day. Yeah. Like even if 0.01% of them liked or didn't like what I said that day, I have to have a boundary that doesn't get in. You know?
Do you ever like read the really bad ones out loud, like the Hollywood actors do sometimes?
Anytime I come across, I go, why did I subject myself to this? This doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't make me feel bad. It just makes me confused. Like it's like you know what it is? It's like you got to have a compass, and you got to keep magnets away from the compass because it fucks with it, right? And this is actually something Seneca talks about. He says, you got to know the path that you're on. And he says, not be distracted by the paths that crisscross yours or the footsteps from those who are hopelessly lost. And it's like, I'm doing what I'm trying to do. You might think you know what I'm trying to do, or you might think you know what I should do, but you don't. And conversely, other people doing their own thing, whether they're creators or writers or philosophers, they're doing their own thing. And if I take my eye off my paper to look at theirs, I'm going to get myself into trouble. And so I try to keep kind of a narrow focus where, like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I care about, and that's enough.
It's beautiful. Well, Ryan Holiday, I love your books. I've read Ego is the Enemy and The Obstacle is the Way and The Daily Stoic, and now Wisdom Takes Work. And now I have about 42 other books of yours to read, but those are some of my favorite. And truly, there are a couple authors that, like Robert Greene, I was very nervous when I had him on the podcast.
He's the best.
He's amazing. Yeah. And he's just as good in real life.
He's
and
better.
Even after a stroke, I was like, this man's
Incredible.
horsepower is insane. But I was just such a fan of the way his brain worked. And I think it's the same with you. Like, reading these books, these cannot be easy to put together, to take these complex ideas and make them simple. And so, if you're watching, they're really, really worth a read, which is not always true for every book today.
Well, thank you.
And so, thank you for writing them. Thank you for spending some time here with us.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, it was just the exit year because when you're running a startup, I'll tell you my entire salary history, like 6 months of nothing, then $70,000 a year. Then I think it was 105, then 120, and then 150. And once you hit $150,000, at that point, it's, I was still single, no dependents, living in New York City. You're not balling out, but it was enough that I was focused on the business.
Yeah.
And then you sell the business and make, basically infinite money.
Infinite money.
Yeah.
Do you ever say how much you sold the business for? You say 250 million, right?
I'm supposed to say I think at this point we're to say it's a reported 250 because at one point the acquirer didn't want to, but yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And how much of the business did you own at that time?
Half.
Dang.
Yeah.
So that's pretty infinite money.
It's pretty much infinite money. I mean, half of it was cash, half of it was stock. But again, the way I look at it is there's nothing I want that I can't have. And at this point, if I make more money, it's for the love of the game versus like what else I could do with the money.
What do you mean when you say it's for the love of the game? Like, why keep going after you've made $100 million?
It's my sport. Like, it's like if someone is a great tennis player or whatever, like, they're not going to retire at 31 or 32. They want to do this for another 5 years, 10 years. It's a thing that, like, it gives me joy. Very competitive person, and it's my arena and place to compete.
Yeah, I've seen that firsthand.
Yeah.
I was watching you at the dinner when everybody was kind of, telling you like, tell me about what's really going on there.
Yeah,
I don't believe it. So you now have built how many companies?
Meaningful companies too, but in college, we never built any enterprise value with this business, but, straight up made cash.
Yeah.
So
it was just a cash flowing profitable business from day one, basically.
The lifetime of a lot of these applications was 30 to 60 days. But again, our peak days were 50 grand a day, which at 20 years old was insane. Like, even if you had 10 or 20 good days, that was amazing.
Yeah, I think that's pretty rad at any age. What's also crazy is, like, I feel like because we're in Twitter or X or whatever you call it, you start to get this warped worldview where everybody all of a sudden is making 7 figures every weekend. And anything that's less than that is like small or not interesting. And I think one of the cool parts about the company you're building now is like, that's not the case. You're like very much for the small business owner, which is why I invested, obviously.
I think we saw a lot of it firsthand running Teachable, where a lot of people were first-time entrepreneurs making money for the first time. Yeah. So I was like, how can we almost continue that journey where we help them with the next part of their life, which is actually taking their earnings and building wealth?
Yeah. Wait, you know what I want to talk about? Didn't you send me back in the day, didn't you fundraise for this company off of a Notion document?
Yeah.
That was a sick Notion document. Yeah. Have you ever shared that?
I'm sure I've probably shared publicly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to find out. We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah. But you basically, everybody thinks it's really hard to get strangers money. Mm-hmm. You did it a really weird way. Talk to us about how you got other people to give you cash.
Yeah. So actually, if you go back right before that, when I fundraised for my fund, I raised about $70 million on Twitter DMs with, I want to say, like maybe under 5 actual meetings.
What was in the DM?
It was
lots of feed pics.
It was, lots of feed pics. Mm-hmm. Subscribe to my OnlyFans. Fund this. You get free lifetime access. No, it was a Notion doc. Granted, the good thing is 2 big things were happening for me. 1, I had a track record. Fund 1 was doing well.
Yeah.
And 2, it was the best time in human history to raise capital, right? 0 interest rates and stuff. But yeah, I raised money from 200 LPs, including like Tiger Global was my biggest investor. I raised money from like 10 other venture firms and 50 partners from venture firms, all just by DMing people.
That's wild. And what was in the Notion doc? Because I think this is like one of the things everybody always asks me, how much money do you have to buy a business? How much money do you have to start a business? And my answer is 0.
Yeah.
Because it's actually never a lack of money. It's a lack of knowledge. Mm-hmm. But that sounds like a rich person thing to say.
Yeah.
Until you realize how to get other people's capital. So like if somebody was asking you like, Ankur, right now, I need to get rich people's money in order to build this thing. What would you tell them?
I think you have to, for what worked for me was I had real fucking skin in the game.
Mm.
So what most people don't understand is they look at a venture fund. Venture funds charge 2 and 20, right? Which is 2% management fee or 20% carry, which is the take of profits. What people don't understand is it's actually closer to 20 and 20. It's one of the best kept secrets because venture funds charge those fees for 10 years.
Yep.
So if you raise $100 million, the investor makes 20 million bucks, maybe even 25, regardless of how the fund does. What I did with my fund is I took zero management fees, which was absurd for a fund of that size, and a quarter of all the capital was mine. So yes, the Notion doc is important. Yes, like the mechanism is important. But end of the day, people saw I had real skin in the game, that it became much easier for them to say yes.
Yeah. And I think if somebody wasn't you with your background, they would just decrease the fees. They'd just say, hey, instead of everybody else wants this much money, I'm going to take half of that.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to actually take no management fee, and I'm only going to participate in the upside. If you make money, I make money. If you don't make money, I don't make money.
And what people don't realize, to be an investor, it's actually not that hard to build a track record, because you could invest $1,000 checks. Like a lot of people think, oh, I need to be, a millionaire or make tens of millions of dollars to invest. But I tell a lot of people, if you want to put $20,000 or $30,000, you could get started. Just make sure you do 20 deals, because it takes a while to learn how this game works. And it is a game of numbers.
Totally. I think your first 50K, you kind of got to assume you're going to lose 49,000 of it.
But one of them could return 100x and the math works out.
Yeah. And that's also the interesting part. A lot of times, so we're on our second fund. And I remember when I was first starting out, I used to think, well, I just want to get a little bit in a bunch of deals. Then I think one of your deals, I think it was this company, was too full. And you were like, yeah, you can come in for like 10K. And I was like, Ankur, no fucking way. Yeah. Give me more money. Which really means let me invest more money in you. Otherwise, I don't want to do the deal. And I think that's another thing that people don't realize, is that there's so much money that the wealthy have that they actually fight over who can give good entrepreneurs more money. I never knew that when I was young.
It's a stagger. Like, if you make 10 million, if you have a net worth of $10 million, you are not in the top 1% of households. It's crazy. You're like top 1.5%, but you're on the top 1% with a $10 million net worth. It is completely absurd.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I'd be curious your take is, like, also the more money you have, not really, like, the less pain you really want to tolerate. And so, like, money is like a risk trade-off with pain. And so they want young people who are hungry and willing to tolerate pain for them. And if they're competent, they'll give you cash.
100%. And I think for a lot of people, especially when they get to a certain amount of wealth, it also has, like, they care about the other things. It's like, is it a good narrative? Is it a good story? Is it something I want to tell my friends about? And also then the actual dollar amount becomes less important, because they'd rather do fewer, bigger things, easier to keep track of, versus just like doing little pieces of everything.
Yeah, that's a good move. What would I have to do to pitch you? Like, if I was young and hungry and I wanted you to give me money?
Yeah. So for me, a surprising amount of companies I've invested in have been cold DMs. I think, I don't know about you, but for me, email is dead as a channel. It's just impossible. It's impossible.
I also assume it's spam immediately.
Yeah, it's impossible to keep track of. I've given up.
So if I am going to get Ankur to give me some of his 100 million, I'm going to DM you on Twitter.
I've honestly been DM'd on Instagram. LinkedIn's a little harder, but it doesn't even have to be Twitter. Just some place where I will someday see a message.
Interesting.
And even then, I rarely have invested the first time around. But I think people see progress. So if I see someone either repeatedly DMing or having improved substantially every single time, I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. What do you think the percentage of people are that ever follow up with you to get money?
With good pitches, very low. There's a lot of like automated cold outreach type stuff that is terrible, and those people follow up, and that's just straight, you're just getting blocked. But I think, I forgot the data, but like I think the first 7 emails you send or something, the chances of getting a response are the same, which means you should send 7 emails, because if you have a 5% chance, you'll have a 5% chance even the 7th time you send a message, which is staggering.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That is a life hack.
Yeah.
Because that basically means, you can hit somebody up 7 times. They probably don't even see the first go round. And at some point, there's some switch that flips, I think, with people who were entrepreneurs that are like, oh, this kid's a little psychopath too.
Yeah.
But I'm at least going to respond to them and be like, game, recognize this game.
The switch flips, and there's just dumb luck and serendipity. Like very often I will respond to something because I was on the screen already when it just being the right place, the right time. So sometimes many shots on goal is helpful, because you happen to catch someone at the right time or right place or whatever.
Yeah. The other interesting part I'm always shocked by is how few people keep going after the target that they really want.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they'll send you one message. If you don't respond, they'll think it's embarrassing to send two. And so they'll just never hit you up again.
No, I think being persistent pays off so much. I mean, and I still remember, like, okay, now people will respond to me, but even when I was 18, 19 years old, every time I emailed Mark Cuban, he replied. It's crazy. Yeah.
He is known for that.
Yeah. It was wild. I was like, oh, I could email him and he'll just reply to me.
Dude, Mark Cuban also, guy's off the rails slightly now with love, Mark.
Yeah.
But on Instagram, I posted something basically saying it was about, remember when they were trying to restrict prices under the last administration?
Yeah.
They're like, no, it's a good thing to have price capping.
Yeah.
And I was like, I spent a lot of time in Latin America.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a good thing. Here's my rationale. And I used a friend of mine's on Twitter to like explain it in third person. And Mark commented on my Instagram post and was like, no, this is not right. And if you'd like me to explain it to you so you can understand, I'm happy to DM me. I know. But then I went into the DMs and I was like, saw your thing. I was like, does it ever work when you speak like that to someone?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I'm sorry, that was slightly contentious.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to get anybody to change their mind. But then he's come back around. He's, just you can't keep a guy down.
He's done. I don't think anyone has timed an exit as well as he did. He sold a company that did very little for like $5 billion or whatever back in the late 90s, or a time when $5 billion was a lot more than it is today.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's actually, he did a pretty good exit from the Mavericks too. Because didn't he exit and sell it to Adelson or whoever? Yeah. Adelson. And then, it's fascinating. Okay, well, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was, why did you choose? I can't remember your origin story. Like, what was the pain point that made you choose to build Teachable?
Mm-hmm. So I'd moved to America, spent all this time building Facebook apps, scaled that business. Mm-hmm. And honestly, then I hit 2 years of what in retrospect is sort of an entrepreneurial rut where I probably tried 10 or 15 different businesses and nothing quite took off. And the journey you have as an entrepreneur is you don't even realize it's not taking off. You try a thing. You always get a little bit of feedback. Nothing is that exciting, but then you have a new idea and you're pulled into it, right? So this happened for about 2 years. During that period, I started teaching a little bit on Udemy. I taught in-person classes at General Assembly and built the first version of Teachable as a side project. But the difference with this side project is we just saw market pull from day one.
What does that feel like? Because I think somebody who's never felt it, they don't even know what it feels like to have something that works versus doesn't.
So, and the funny thing is, because I kept asking myself, is this working? Is it not working? But the biggest thing is the first month we processed maybe like $3,000 in course sales. But every single month after that, we processed a little bit more until 8 or 9 months in, we were doing $40,000, $50,000 a month in course sales across, I want to say 15, 20 creators. And I was like, wow, there may be a real business here. And then I went to Silicon Valley, raised a venture round and decided, okay, this is a company.
Could you ever have done that in India?
I think now the world has changed quite a bit where India has now become a pretty good place for entrepreneurship and startups because it's such a large market size. But the thing I appreciated the most about Silicon Valley is it takes young people seriously in a way that most of the world doesn't.
That's a great line. What do you mean by that?
So when I was 19 years old, 20 years old, I was in college. I had the chance to meet, Mark Andreessen, Naval Ravikant, like all these like people that were iconic and I looked up to, and they all took me very seriously, almost as a peer. Like, what are you going to build? Like, this sounds so great. Contrast that with when I went to India and I tried to meet with the CEO of a couple of smaller companies who would condescendingly ask where my parents were, right? It's such a different attitude. And I think San Francisco and Silicon Valley knows that young people have historically done incredible things. So young people are taken very seriously.
Yeah, it's a good point because you're kind of seeing it, whether people like this administration or not, but how the old infrastructure of government is looking at young people coming in with disdain. They're like, this 20-year-old, this 21-year-old. And I think there's no longer this barrier between ability to execute and age. In fact, I mean, the speed at which I see young people able to force function moves with technology means that we're getting slightly more obsolete the older we get.
Also, what you realize is young people typically tend to have so much more time, right? Like they're very time rich. And as a result, can go so much deeper into a lot of things. Like again, imagine if we get to a world where the cost of building something just comes down to how much time you have to play with the thing to build it. It's advantage young people. I mean, you just have so much more time. And that's what I mean when people say Silicon Valley is an idea versus a place. But the idea of Silicon Valley was always, 18, 19, 20-year-olds are going to do amazing things. So listen to them, let them do their thing.
Yeah. And they have the best risk reward trade off ever, which is a future appearance of time because they're young, and simultaneously no real risks because they don't have anything yet.
Absolutely. And if there's anyone, I always tell people if you're 18, 19, or 20, you're in a golden window where a lot more people will be willing to meet with you because of your promise and your potential. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, I think it was easier for me to meet with a lot of iconic Silicon Valley people because I was 18 or 19. So I could be introduced to someone with a bright future. 28, I mean, you're still young, but you're not like, oh, this crazy young person with a bright future.
Were you like a little genius?
I think it was because of the Facebook applications that I built a business that was doing well. Growing up in high school and stuff, I was always smart, but I was pretty rebellious. So my grades were never very good. I wanted to play cricket internationally, so sport was more important to me. I was always smart, but I was barely top 20% of my class, which wasn't that good.
Interesting. And then today, you're building a brand new company. Why did you choose this one?
So it was while selling my last business. And again, as an immigrant, I know nothing about the tax code, nothing about how money works, personal finance. I wasn't investing, I was doing nothing. But I realized how with smart lawyers and accountants, how much opportunity there is in our tax code. And there's no easy way of accessing it.
Yep.
So that was a little bit of a light bulb moment that I was like, if there was an easy way to productize all these tax savings, the tax code, that would be kind of a fun business to build. It's valuable to people. I also I've always loved, if there's a system, how can you be smart about it? How can you hack the system, break the system, whatever? And this felt like a challenge that way. Like here's a system with a bunch of rules, but there's loopholes. How do you actually help people take advantage of these loopholes? So it was a fun kind of business to work on.
How big is the business now?
So we're a little bit over 2 million in annualized revenue. We custody a little bit over $100 million in customer assets. Which is good. We're a couple of years in, and part of me as a founder is like, I wish we were 10 times bigger. But the nature of the space we're in is people trust us with their retirement dollars, and as a result, we are regulated as we should be. And there's a lot of responsibility when it comes to running these kinds of businesses that you have to sort of set up the right infrastructure. We're trying to long-term compete with Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, and these companies that are, anywhere from 40 to 100 years old.
Yeah.
And we're fine if it takes a little bit longer.
Did you have to pay a lot of money for that website name, your domain name?
Codie.com, yes. I signed very strict paperwork allowing me to never talk about how much, but it was quite significant.
Why do they always want you guys to never say how much people pay for one-word domains? Is it just like one conglomerate that owns all these and then they say don't tell anybody?
I think the biggest reason is there's no objective way of valuing a domain, right? Because it's such an illiquid market that there's not that many buyers and not that many sellers, but the sellers are pretty smart. They're happy to wait almost an infinite amount of time. Like, for instance, someone revealed they paid $2 million for friend.com, which is insane. We didn't pay anywhere near that much. And
I was going to guess 7 figures, but I'm okay. We won't tell our friends on the internet. Yeah. Okay, I don't want to get you sued in the portfolio company we invested in.
Exactly.
That's why. Yeah. Well, I think, and you just get killed on the internet. Remember when Nick and Sean Purry put somewhere, and then I think they only paid like $400K for it. Not only that is
a lot of money. Yeah.
$400K is a lot of money for somewhere.com, and then they just got massacred.
I will say that we have made a very strong ROI already.
Yeah.
Because we deal with people's dollars. So trust is really important. And a domain is a way of shortcutting that trust.
Yeah. Do you think yours is better than contrarianthinking.co?
I think we're about the same, roughly equivalent.
I can probably sell mine for $2 million too. I'm actually so bad at branding; it's almost laughable. Like, can you spell how many?
Here's why that could be a good thing for a lot of people. In that, I think too many people worry about it too soon. Like, again, when we started Teachable, the company was called Fedora, which is an awful name. Domain name use fedora.com. But guess what? We spent no time on it. We got to market faster. We got real customers faster.
Yeah.
You can fix brand later on. People don't realize that. Like, you can fix brand a year in, 2 years in. At any given point, like even now, we're a little bit over 2 years in. But 10 years from now, almost all of our customers 10 years from now are in our future, right? So that was the sort of attitude that you hold on a lot to what you already have. But the majority of your customers in 10 years, you've not met yet. They're in your future. What you have now is a tiny, tiny percentage of them.
That's a great point because, I mean, part of the reason so many people, I think, never become entrepreneurs or get real revenue in their business is they have this whole story about what it takes. It's like, I need a website and then an LLC and then insurance. I mean, I see it on my YouTube comments all the time. It's like, you missed 12 steps. It's like, nobody does all 12 steps in a row. You just start and you go.
Even like, again, our business helps people save money on taxes. The number of times I have to tell people you don't have a tax problem, you need to make more money, right? Like your problem right now is not taxes. You're making $30,000 a year. Great. It's a great start. Just doing it is important. Don't try and save taxes on 30 grand. Think about how you can 10x your business. And then we'll talk about saving money on taxes.
Yeah, well, because the thing with Carrie that I think is unique is it's really focused on businesses and small businesses. And so basically, if you ever run a small business, taxes are the biggest pain in the ass. And you're always getting these, different notices from all over the place. And then your taxes will materially differ depending on who you get advice from. Absolutely. And so it's often not a how, it's a who, and the who can totally fuck you. And so the cool part about the software, I'm like sipping my own Kool-Aid here, but is that you have standardization.
Yeah. And the US tax code, when you look at it, I think you can tell a lot about what a country stands for, what it incentivizes by looking at its tax code. And the US tax code is written in favor of business owners, which I think is great. Like the country wants to incentivize the creation of business. So it's the challenge we have is how do we productize that so people can take advantage of all of that? Yeah. It's like, taxes are not why people become business owners, but it's just one other perk, which is why when you look at, the wealthiest people in the country, not only are they typically business owners, they're also paying taxes at a much lower rate than regular salaried employees.
Yeah. If you weren't going to run this business, what's the other business that you're like, God, that's a cool opportunity right now?
I want to buy a cricket team. I mean, honestly, that's not a,
it's the richest person thing you've ever said.
That is not it's partially rich person. It's partially for my failed athletic dreams, right? It's like, if you can't do the thing yourself, like at least buy the business that does the thing.
I like that. I think that's actually, isn't that what, I mean, one of my favorite guys is Wayne Huizinga, the guy who started Waste Management. Yeah. And that was it. He's like, drove trash trucks, owned trash trucks, played in trash until he owned 3 baseball teams and also dated
There's
models.
A non-insignificant number of people, I think, who have been very successful in business who would give it all up for like their failed sports dreams.
Are you one of them?
Probably. Like it's as I'm getting older, that trade-off is getting harder because now I'd be at close to my professional sports retirement age. So maybe not. But yeah, there were times like a few years ago I was like, would I give it all up to be like really good at cricket, play in a large stadium, hear the fans chant your name? Yeah, probably.
But then you'd come to the US and nobody would know who you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that is a little bit of a
downside. You got to pick like football or something, like international football.
There's 0 brown people in any major American sport, which is insane.
Is that true?
I think there's a half Indian dude in the NHL. That's about as close.
Well,
I think we have no one in the NBA, the NFL, and MLB.
That's wild because you should. Your population.
We're killing it. Spelling bee, you're not competing with
you
us.
are dominant. And procreation.
Yeah.
You guys figured out procreation. You like
and being CEOs.
Yeah. It's actually really cool watching the growth. I mean, because it's interesting. Like different demographics do have these natural tendencies towards entrepreneurship. And India's huge at it. I mean, in a force multiplier way. Like we have a lot of Latin American entrepreneurs, but we have nowhere near the percentage 100%. Who get the scale that. Why is that?
I also think it's exacerbated in immigration patterns because the enterprising Indian people are the ones who came here. So it is much stronger in the US. Like a lot of immigration in the US were people who came and bought small businesses.
Yeah.
Like,
Is it just really hard to get here from India? And so the people who get here, you're like, that's the cream of the crop.
Like, for instance, like there's a lot of Gujarati people here, and I was reading it's staggering. I think like half of all small motels are owned by them. And they're all like, one extended family or something.
Yeah. I remember Twitter not liking it, but I was thinking that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really, and I think that's also one of the things, that I think America stands for, or at least used to stand for, maybe still does or whatever, is it becomes this magnet where if you are a person that wants to go do a thing and build a thing, you move here. Which is why for my dad, it was very clear that, I would do better in a country like America. And I think it's important we maintain that.
I totally agree. It's like half the point of everything we do. I mean, I continue to be blown away that only 6% of Americans own businesses. That number to me just like doesn't make sense in my head.
I bet that doesn't account for the one-person business.
Because it counts for the one-person business, but it doesn't account for non-revenue producing businesses.
Okay.
Because LLC creation, more than I do. There's a shit ton of those. Yeah. But those are just incorporated businesses that never actually are realized. Yeah. I mean, we could somebody will tell me on the internet if I'm a liar.
Because the numbers I looked at was more if you include all kinds of self-employment income.
The highest I've seen is 11%. What was the highest you saw?
I saw something higher, but the denominator, but it also depends. Is the denominator people that are eligible to start a business? Are we excluding, 9-year-olds and, stuff like that as well?
Yeah. And what is the category of business?
Yeah.
I guess as long as anyway, we don't have to get too wonky, but if you measure it the same way across all countries and then see which ones have the highest. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some cool things you do at your company, Carrie. For instance, I saw this tweet that I thought was brilliant about how you do vacation policy to keep high-level people, but make them stay in office the rest of the year.
Yeah. So we're in the office every day of the year. Not strict about it. Like if someone comes in 4 times a week or whatever, it's fine. But the default expectation is we're in the office every single day. But we're remote for 1 month. And partially it's because for anyone in New York, winter in New York can be soul crushing. So we're remote in February, in the office 11 months of the year, which I think works pretty well.
I don't know why I would be scared that my business might fall apart. It doesn't.
The business doesn't fall apart. It is you still have to learn how to do it. And I'll be candid, we're still learning how to get good when we're remote. It is something I kind of battle against a little internally because I love being in office. I think we're super productive. But the downside is we're not taking advantage of a global workforce. So we're paying New York salaries for pretty much all roles.
Yeah.
And over a long period of time, am I missing out by not hiring an amazing person for some specific skill because they live elsewhere? Potentially. So we'll see how that evolves.
Have you found that by letting people go for a month remote, you retain people more, you get better caliber of talent?
The thing that's been interesting is when most people come back, their reaction is not like, that's sick, why can't we do it always? Like they're like, yeah, it was great. But they're like, oh, I missed the office. I kind of missed being around everyone. And it almost builds renewed enthusiasm for being back at the workplace.
Interesting. I think we're thinking about trialing something like that in August here, or maybe July, because it's miserable.
Like, again, there's no one, and also the benefit you have is like people got annoyed on the internet as they always do, but no one in our current company has kids. But I think we have kids. You have to do it over the summer, right? Because no one can go in February.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Why don't you just hang out with the kids more?
Yeah.
Or is that not? Is that something a person without kids would say?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we won't put that on Twitter so I get murdered.
Good for engagement.
Exactly. Well, that is true. Yeah. So, we know that 90% of startups fail, but you chose to keep doing startups anyway. Were you ever scared that you weren't going to make it or that it was going to fail?
I am more scared this time, and I'll tell you why. Because the first time, it doesn't matter. You're expected to fail. The first time, like most companies fail, you'll probably fail. It's fine. This time, I have a stronger fear of failure because I've built up this like self-image of myself as someone that is good at companies. I've told other people what to do. I've sat on panels telling people what to do. It'd be fucking embarrassing to publicly fail. So this time, there's more of a fear. But what I've realized as a second-time founder is a lot of things are easier. Fundraising is easier, hiring is easier, but truly building a product that people like is always going to be hard.
It's so hard. Yeah. But you're right. It is scarier, especially when you're public. I think about that now with these companies, and we have a lot of companies. So like ultimately one of them that is public will fail.
Yeah.
And I have a bunch of self-worth wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm always mouthing off on the internet about stuff. I better know what the fuck I'm
exactly.
talking about.
I'm like, oh, how embarrassing. They all like the startup guru, like, telling everyone what to do. But the funny thing is, what you'll find at least is, even if that were to happen, there may be some pockets that may kind of laugh at you or whatever. But the people who know, the people who build businesses, ultimately know how difficult this whole thing is, that you're not going to get that from them.
Yeah. Do you try to surround yourself with a certain type of person in order to achieve these big things and not get crushed?
Probably more so when I was younger, when I was living in California, I did that. Now, honestly, I like a diversity of people, in that I like people that are very competitive, but they don't have to all be competitive at building the largest startup. Like, I'll get bored if I'm around people that don't want to be the best at something, but I can be around people that want to be the best at like running a sub 3 hour marathon, or like the best at whatever special skill. I think that kind of diversity is probably more fun than just people that want to build startups or businesses or whatever.
Yeah. And I do think at some point, levels to the game, you kind of, money becomes slightly less interesting to talk about. And it's more the game and winning.
Yeah.
I've sort of had to pressure myself into keep talking about money, because when I was younger, I wish that other people would have told me the truth. They're like, how much did you make? How much did you actually spend? Like, what happens at this point? And I think once you start, you just don't talk about that anymore. And the people who do kind of talk about it in a scammy way, and it's not real.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool that you still share so many of the, here's how much money we made, here's what happened here. Like, that's really rare.
Yeah. I think the other thing I've talked to friends in similar spaces is, a lot of people ended up having very different attitudes towards it. And the thing I've tried to consciously be careful of is not to become the person where they're so addicted to the chase of more money for the money itself, where it becomes a little like you'll never be enough. Like, I know people who have mid hundreds of millions of dollars who are sad they're not a billionaire. And I don't know. I find that kind of sad. Like, I think if you want to be a billionaire because you want to win the game, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But if you feel like you don't have enough and you're coming from this place of scarcity, that's something I'm consciously trying to avoid.
Yeah. Do you still feel like you're poor and you don't have money? Or have you gotten
I feel
over
like I have
that?
an infinite amount of money. It's not, as I said, it's not that I'm lacking for anything. I think if anything, what will change by my further success is a number that I go to the grave with, in like all practical yet somewhat dark terms.
That's so fascinating. So you don't have any of that poor kid mentality anymore.
No, I think I have.
Did you
I'm
ever?
very blessed. I think I have infinite. When I first came to America, I remember just like, because my parents had saved their entire life for me to be there, I was like, I didn't spend money. Like, spending money felt frivolous and stupid. And I think that sort of sense of scarcity made me appreciate not having to think about money. So to me, it's amazing to not have to think about it. Like, let's imagine we're on a family vacation, flights get canceled, we need to go rebook some expensive flights. Just not having to think about any of that, being like, oh, here's a credit card, I don't have to worry about it. That to me is the real value of it. When I fly whatever, business class, first class, my seat is flat, but I don't need a private jet.
Yeah, agree.
So, stuff like that.
Sometimes I'd like one though.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. We were on a tiny one the other day to Marfa because we bought some land out there, which is a ridiculous thing, but it was anyway. So, and the one nice thing about them is just the time savings. But the thing that people don't realize, like a nice business class seat, way nicer than a seat, except on the biggest jet out there. So I think a lot of this is just flexing on the internet.
The pain of maintaining stuff, and yes, eventually you can outsource that and you scale it all out, is a lot of times. Someone was telling me, some old like billionaire dude or whatever, that like there's no yacht better than your friend's yacht. Like, if you get to like do the fun thing once in a while when you have to deal with it, but not deal with all the work that it entails, that's the best.
I agree with that. I still totally have the poor kid mentality. I don't know if I'll ever get rid of it, where I'm pretty sure at any moment, like, we could totally be broke again. And I don't know if that's an edge sometimes or not, but I think it's really cool that you seem to have been like, no, I'm going to be really grateful for what I have. And I think that's a total hack.
It's a battle I have to have with my mom quite often, because she's always like, oh, like, you're paying for this like slightly expensive vacation. What if you run out of money? I'm like, Mom, I can show you an Excel model, right? Like we can play with this. Like that's not how math works. Like we can, like I could spend 10 times more, and like this is not. We'll be fine.
I love the line, Mom, I'm going to show you an Excel model.
Like,
She's like, that doesn't help.
yeah, it doesn't help. She's like, this feels like a lot of money.
That's really sweet, though. What would you tell, a young kid listening to all this today who is just like, man, I don't know if I'm smart enough. I don't know if I can code. I don't know if I'll ever get there. What should I start? What would you tell a 20-something that wanted to be you?
I think when I started, and I think it's true for a lot of people, there's a certain element of like doing these things for the love of the game in a way that, yes, part of my motivation was to be very successful and make a lot of money. But I also really liked building shit, playing with things, growing products, and to kind of not forget that part. I think anyone listening to this right now, you're in such a fun time to build and play with stuff. Like back when I was in high school, we used like Microsoft front page to build web. It was like the tooling was awful, right? Like now there's incredible tools where you can imagine anything, build stuff. I think it's a great time to like, just go deep on that, have fun with it. And I think it's a phenomenal time for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think also if you do interesting things, then interesting people find you interesting.
100%.
And so just build something, whatever it is. Especially because these days, I mean, we find this on the internet. People think it's cool that you start a vending machine route and you talk about it. Like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, but just try to build. And I think we're losing some of that.
I think like the act of creation. I guess I talked about the good part now. I think the dangers of now is it's become so much easier to consume. Like there's so much more stuff to consume that it's very easy to fall into this consumption trap where like you're spending 4 hours a day watching TikTok videos or whatever. That fighting that, I would imagine, to be the hardest challenge. I don't know what it's like to grow up when you've been, I was talking to someone who had Instagram since she was 11 years old. I don't know what that does to your brain or what that's like to deal with. So I guess being able to counter that is probably the challenge. But yeah, if you can create instead of consume, that'll take you a long way.
You're single, right?
Yeah.
Not married. No girlfriend.
No girlfriend at the moment.
Why not?
Hey, is that I mean, I was in a pretty long-term relationship when I was young, like 20 to 27. And I think dating in New York can be quite fun. But the downside of that is, I think the challenge a lot of people have is a little bit of the shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
Where you're
too many models.
When you're dating someone and there's someone else and
not Excel models. Other models.
Correct. But with that said, I mean,
how old are you?
I'm 35 now.
Yeah.
And my parents weren't that excited when I started the second business. They're like, you should get a wife. Like that, we would be more excited at this point with a wife than another company. So
were they nervous when you started your first one? And how did you deal with the fact that maybe you wanted to take a different path than what your parents wanted you to do?
It polarized my mom and dad a little bit because initially they were supportive, but then I said I had 2 years of nothing quite working out. And my dad was very much like, dude, just keep trying stuff. Like, I wanted to do a business. I never could. You have every opportunity in the world. You're super young. My mom was like, why don't you get a job at Facebook? They may hire you. Like you should go work for someone. So it bifurcated a little between the two. But as soon as the company started doing well, I think my mom was happy.
Got on board. Yeah, I mean,
but even like when I was close to dropping out of college at one point, my mom was very against that. I think my dad's a little bit more risk taking.
Would you tell a younger version of you to do the same path?
I'm very happy with the path I took. I think I was very fortunate that I was in the right place at the right time. Like when I look at all the people I met when I was in California between the age of like 18 and 23, they've all gone on to do such incredible things. There's something special and unique about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if such a place exists today, by the way. Like maybe, like if it does, it may be online somewhere. I don't think it exists in like
it. So you think Silicon Valley is kind of dead?
I think it's not. It's at the time, like, so this again was 2007, 8 till 2013. There was no competition, right? Like New York didn't have as many companies. Like LA didn't have as many companies. So I think the rise of the rest of the world has been generally a good thing. But if you wanted to be in a startup, you had to go to Silicon Valley then.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I remember back in the day, like remember AOL, the
Yeah.
and Steve Case had his Rise of the Rest tour.
Mhm.
Remember that? And he would go around the country basically on this bus talking to second and third tier cities, which like probably were
Yeah.
New York back then,
Yeah.
but anywhere else besides Silicon Valley, trying to get people to do entrepreneurship. And now it's existing all over the place. I mean, you're here in Austin, and we had a portfolio company. Did you go to the dinner on Saturday?
No.
Okay. We had a portfolio company dinner with a bunch of our portcos, and I think there were like 8 of them in town.
Wow.
Which is crazy. I mean, 2 of them are billion-dollar businesses and they're here. Like, you would have never had that on our come up.
When I started Teachable in New York in 2013, 2014, it was a weird thing to do. Like, even at the time, we were questioned a lot. Like, why are you building this company in New York? And there actually was a general sense that you couldn't find experienced startup people in New York because anyone with experience would be in San Francisco. Ironically, we had a good time recruiting then because there's never a shortage of people in their 20s want to live in New York. So there was a big exodus of people. But yeah, now it's everywhere.
You also sold your company during the stock market crash of 2020, right? What was that like?
So we ended up signing the deal to sell the company on the single biggest drop in market history. It was a Thursday when COVID was starting to be real. Then on Tuesday, we announced the deal, which then became the new biggest stock market crash in history. So it was a very confusing time because on the one hand, we're like, man, like probably a great time to sell your business. Asset values are falling. But on the other hand, we saw our biggest sign up and revenue days at Teachable because this was the opposite sort of trend where our business, like we sold the company at about 25 million in ARR and we doubled to 50 million 3 months later.
Wow.
Which was our growth projection for the next like 12 plus months.
Then you could have had extra infinite money.
Correct. But again, like part of me was like, oh, I should have waited. And I was like, my internal dialogue is life has been so good to you. You've been so fortunate. Don't be the whiny rich asshole who's like, oh, if only I could have had more. Like, like net, I'm so grateful for everything I've gotten. So every time that voice comes, I'm like, shut up. Like
I agree with that.
Out pretty well.
Well, plus, I think it's cool to build something that's never existed before. So like Teachable was one of the really big learning platforms back in the day. Now there's a lot of them. That's awesome. There's open market. But this new thing at Carey doesn't really exist. So thankfully, like you had enough to keep going.
And with Teachable, I was passionate about one side of the business, but I was not passionate about the other side of the business. Like I was always a very bad student. I didn't go to class. Like even when it came to like online courses, I didn't take a ton of them. I liked the business of being a creator and that side of it. But I'm more passionate about the business I'm building this time around than the first time.
Really, tax code just gets you going.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge in a way that, like again, in the Teachable business, I found it fascinating how creators make money and run their business. But I was always a terrible student. Like I never went to class. Like the idea of like I was not passionate about education quite the same way.
Would you tell a young kid today to go to college?
I think go to college as a great way to grow as an individual, as a person, potentially because it's fun. I wouldn't go there for the sole purpose of like maximizing my future income. Yeah, so I think what college is, it becomes a luxury good where if you can afford it, you have time, your parents have money, whatever, go do it, have fun, have an incredible time.
What about an MBA?
Oh, like I almost never hire MBAs. And once in a while, if they do, it's despite their MBA.
I always say that we have to wash the MBA off you, even though I have one.
At the same time, again, look, if you're 27 years old, 28 years old, you've worked pretty hard as a banker, kind of want to chill for 2 years, you get into Stanford, Harvard, whatever, it's a pretty good life. You'll meet cool people, you'll hang out. Think of it as a mid-career vacation, sure. But if you fully go there to internalize how to be better at business, then that's a big red flag.
Yeah, huge waste of time. But I think it's useful for people to say stuff like that because Lord knows that's not how they're selling the stuff these days. And, I was listening to...
And now it costs what, like $100 and something thousand a year?
Yeah. I mean, back in my day, I was in finance. And so they paid for it. So that was sweet.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get to make whatever I made at the time. Plus you guys pay for my college. Awesome.
Oh, you also keep your salary?
I did a fucking great deal back in the day. This is one of my proudest deals, actually. I was working at State Street at the time, and They paid me. I was making, great money for me back then, a couple $100K a year, great. And then they paid for me to go to Georgetown for my MBA. And they had no clawback provision. So typically how it works is if they pay for your MBA, you got to stay for like 2 or 3 years.
Sounds like a terrible deal from their perspective.
Nailed it. I mean, they're so big. They're like, shut up, you tiny little analyst or whatever I was. But what's interesting is I'm actually going to see Dave Ramsey on Monday. And I was watching his old videos. And there was this video, Ankur, where somebody said, they're like, we're $1 million in debt. And he's like, oh, Lord, what'd you do for that? And then they said, we are $450,000 in student loan debt for two people that make $70,000 each a year.
MBAs or
advanced degrees in like policy or something. They work for the government. And I just think that is almost, of course, that is their decision. That wasn't a very good decision. But also, we've been so programmed that to me, that is a huge disservice to two people that like, they will never be able to get out from underneath that. Yeah. And they can't even get out of it with bankruptcy.
Yeah, I think there's so much programming of like, oh, you don't know what to do, go to school. It's never a bad idea. I think we need to undo a lot of that education.
Yeah, and that's why I think Teachable is so important, and why what we do, I hope, is important for people. You know what else is weird? People hate online courses, and people hate online education. Yeah. Like they equate it with, like, if you can't do, you teach, or that it's all scams. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I also think when we haven't gotten there, but at some point, the way online education works, we're going to look back on what it is today and laugh. Because today, when you look at online education, it is really just a mishmash of old formats delivered, right? It's like, oh, we used to have videos, so let's take videos and let's like we're basically doing the old paradigm now. And I don't have better ideas yet, but someone will, and we kind of need to rebuild education in a way that's digitally native.
Almost like a Duolingo advanced version, etc.
Or I'm sure it'll vary a lot by what's
your hottest ideas?
What you're learning. I mean, for me, what's always worked is just doing stuff. Like even in college, like, yes, I would eventually study because there was a test, but like I only learned how to do anything, whether it's coding, building a business, like playing a sport, like really the majority of it comes from doing the thing.
That's so true. Yeah. So it almost has to be, I mean, that's the same when we think about our curriculum. It's you learn to some level, but simultaneous with learning, you have check-ins that basically make sure you're learning the right thing at the right time. And then you have execution, which is like take little baby steps that can't really.
Can Matt do it? Can Nick do it? Can Matt Boudreau do it? So depending on the business, is this something that requires my time? And if it's not something that I have to address, if it's a problem and they're coming with a solution, I don't have to be in. You already gave the solution. So there's this beautiful thing that's happening in the military right now. They're reorganizing the way that they do leadership in something that's called Mission Command. Mission Command is a decentralized approach where I'm empowering the next lowest leader, the subordinate, to assume risk and responsibility and be able to make the decision on their own as long as they're in alignment with the philosophy and commander's intent. So my job is to communicate clearly my intent. Like, this is what we're trying to do with this business or with the culture. And then the person that is running that project should be able to make all of the decisions. The only time it should come to me is if like there isn't a solution. So here's 3 bad options.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'm like, that sucks. Let's go with option B, which is the least of the 3.
I always giggle that I think the CEO's real job, like everybody wants a CEO job, and all it is you get the worst problems all the time that nobody else can solve.
Yeah, worst personnel problems usually.
Yep.
And then worst financial situations.
Yeah. The other thing that I've really noticed with you, like getting to know you over the last year or so, is you do a really good job setting expectations and communicating very concisely. So I was wondering, like, did you always know that? Did you learn that? How do you teach
retarded.
somebody?
Yeah, like, and you ask my wife if I'm a good communicator. No,
maybe not that type.
Yeah, it's discipline, I think it's become a byproduct of just not having time. And then when you don't have time and you look at the available time that you have, and everybody says that time is this like most important resource. I argue that attention is the most important resource. I could be doing something specific with my time, but if my attention is elsewhere, or 100% of my attention is focused on something else or ineffective or inefficient in the time that I have, I'm just wasting my attention. So to answer your question concisely, I know really, I pretty self-aware of what I'm good at. And all of the other things, I'm not going to spend my time on because I'm wasting my attention on those things. I'd rather just defer to the expert. You know, as I'm over there talking to Chris and I'm struggling through a couple of things, and he's really good at those things. So I was like, can we go talk about these things so I can use your expertise to answer things that I don't truly understand about how to invest in some things that are coming across the desk? He's like, yeah, jujitsu, coffee, money, done.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I found that people who are the most successful typically have the least knowledge ego out there. Not that we don't all have big egos. I'm sure you have a big ego in many ways, but you're like, no, I don't care where the information comes from. If it's better than me, smarter than me, gonna make me more money, gonna make me more efficient, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times the people who don't succeed are the ones that they think they got to do it all by themselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And as I've had like 5 different careers in my life at this point, from fighting for world championships to obviously in the military, the entrepreneur, author, the Walt Whitman approach of don't be judgmental, be curious. Your ego will always get in the way of that. If like I know everything, and I will be judgmental about how much money you have or your approach to business. Inversely, the opposite end of that is, I just want to understand more. I just want to know more, and I'm so curious about it. How many times am I asking you about how to do something or what to do? It's that curiosity is what gives us growth.
Yeah, it's so good. You said another thing that I loved, which was you tweeted, a wise man once said, be careful who you let on your ship, because some people will sink the whole ship just because they can't be the captain.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, and how do you watch out for that?
I think there's 3 kind of energies with people. You have people that create negative energy. They're just like a succubus of joy and attention, and they need to be in these positional places of authority. And then you have kind of energy neutral people that they want to contribute, but they also have their goals and their ambitions, and those are amazing employees. Those are incredible people. And then there's just the natural leaders. That's the Mike Weimers. That's the General Georges. That's the Mattises that bring a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of expertise, no ego, and they joyfully will stand in the back while somebody else gets the credit for their accomplishments. Yeah. It's a really dangerous thing who we surround ourselves with. It's scriptural. It's very clear, that you effectively become who you surround yourself with. This also, studies have shown, economically, financially, your circle, plus or minus $100,000, is where you're going to end up. Yeah. But I am disgusted to the ladder climber that's always looking for like a rich person to hang around. That's a disgusting person. Yeah. But the people that I get to spend time with are joyful, kind, energy positive people that are incredibly successful as a byproduct of who they are as a person.
Yeah. So when you're looking for those natural leaders and the energy positive, how do you find them? Like, can you tell when you go and meet somebody, can you immediately look at them in the windows through their soul and say, that's you?
I having been embezzled a few times, I say,
haven't we all?
Yeah, I'm a great judge of character, right? A trained interrogator that gets, back to no ego. In the interview, you can usually tell pretty quickly somebody that's sincere and authentic, somebody that is kind and generous. And especially for like middle management or above, I always go and eat with them. I always want to share a meal with them. I want to see how they treat the staff. I want to see how long it takes them to pick what they're going to eat.
Amen. That's top priority.
Yeah. Man, you walk into, we got great coffee in Austin. And they're like, hey, want to grab a cup of coffee? And they're like, yeah, let's meet at Starbucks. Cool. Not getting hired.
Yes. See? I didn't even prep it with that. Yeah. I have a war on Starbucks.
Yeah, but not just philosophically, because like we're on opposite ends and they're a competitor, but they're just terrible coffee with horrible milk. And then you walk in and they're like, I want a soy latte with 2.5 pumps, and like you spelled my name on the cup wrong. And how they tip, I judge on that to see if they're a generous person or if they're like boastfully being generous because they're with me, or if like they're tipping to be appropriate and kind, and they like see a server's name and they use their name when they're addressing them. Like all these little tiny things are just little snapshots into who this person is. They sit down at the table to order, and you're like, imagine that person in your office. I will wear their skin in like 5 days as they So like you got to create authentic opportunities to see who these people are. And anybody, when they're well fed, they're caffeinated, they're dressed up nice, and they walk into the office nice and prepared, they can put it on a show for 20 minutes. You got to take them out of that environment to kind of get a picture of their character. That's a hard thing to do sometimes.
It's a really good point. I also think about when I look back at like where I've gone wrong with my dad has a line that I love, which is like, you can't do a good deal with a bad guy.